Chapter 768. Qin Yining also had her own plans. Compared to being stuck in a dilemma and offending both sides in the end, she preferred to choose a side to side with. In any case, she had already offended this delicate imperial concubine Yun, so there was nothing to worry about. Qin Yining smiled and said, "It's not a big deal. It's just that this subject's wife saw that the cloak imperial concubine Yun was wearing was not appropriate, so I reminded her. I didn't think that imperial concubine Yun would like this cloak so much." This subject's wife was thinking that the Titan princess would be arriving in a few days. In order to show the power of the country and let the Tatars see the rules and etiquette of our dojo, this subject's wife must learn from Mama. I also feel that I hit it off very well with Imperial Concubine Yun and want to invite Imperial Concubine Yun to accompany me. However, I don't know what the Empress Dowager thinks and will listen to your orders before making a decision. Qin Yining's words did not go too far. She did not directly say anything out of line in front of the Empress Dowager, who valued power. This was to prevent the Empress Dowager from becoming serious with the Empress again. But even though the Empress Dowager had only been in this position for a short time, she still knew that red was something only people of status could wear. However, the Empress Dowager's first reaction was to feel that Qin Yining and the Empress were looking for trouble. It was just a piece of clothing. Who could wear it and who could not? But Qin Yining immediately mentioned learning etiquette and rules, which was equivalent to giving her a wake-up call. She was now the Empress Dowager. She was no longer the village woman of the past. She really had to pay attention to these annoying rules. Otherwise, with so many old officials of Beiji, as well as the nobility and Dayan officials who had surrendered, wouldn't they laugh at them? The Empress Dowager was very irritated, but she had been caught. She had no choice but to nod and agree. Wife Shishi is right. These rules have to be paid attention to. Our dojo has only been established for a short period of time. We still have to learn from the old people of Beiji. The Empress Dowager is broad-minded and reasonable. This is truly the fortune of this subject's wife and the people of the world. Qin Yining looked at the Empress Dowager with praise and a sincere expression. Her sincere appearance really pleased the Empress Dowager. Her smile made the wrinkles at the corners of the Empress Dowager's eyes appear much more amiable. Concubine Yi sat on her knees, dumbfounded. Her watery eyes were wide open, as if she couldn't understand how things had turned out this way. She was young and beautiful, and was deeply doted on by your Majesty. She also had the Empress Dowager as her backing. Even that ugly old woman, the Empress, did not dare to act rashly in front of her. But today, she had fallen in front of a little princess. Imperial Concubine Yun straightened her body and straightened her neck as she coquettishly said, "Aunt, could it be that Yun really wants to learn the rules from this lowly servant? What's wrong with Yun's rules? How dare you?" The Empress Dowager rebuked. If the Empress and Qin Yining were not present, and the Empress Dowager did not want to be seen as a joke, she would have already slapped her. But now, she could only suppress her temper and remind him, Prince Zhongshuan's consort said it so clearly. In order to show off our Han people's manners in front of the Tatar princess, you have to learn. Moreover, since you two hit it off, and you have nothing to do, what's wrong with learning the rules and being companions? The Empress Dowager did not expose her in front of her face and gave her a good way out. Why didn't this blockhead know how to use it? Imperial Concubine Yi's eyes were filled with tears as she looked up at the Empress Dowager. She felt wronged and angry. Clearly, she did not receive the Empress Dowager's signal. The Empress Dowager had already given Imperial Concubine Yi a look from an angle where she thought Qin Yining and the Empress could not see. However, Imperial Concubine Yi still did not understand, causing the Empress Dowager's heart to ache. Qin Yining lowered his eyes and pretended that he did not understand the exchange between the two people in front of him. If the Empress could not gain the upper hand in the face of an opponent of this level, it could only mean that the Empress did not have the heart to fight and did not put any thought into these matters. In fact, Qin Yining did not approve of the Empress's passive response. She was Li Qitian's wife, so she should take out the status and power of a wife and do what a wife should do. At the same time, she should enjoy the treatment that a wife should have. She could not let others take away her power, nor could she let others take away the treatment that she should have. Regardless of these, just for the sake of the child, as a mother, she had to stand firm. Otherwise, in the future, Your Majesty would have more and more children, and the number of favored concubines would also increase. Wouldn't that squeeze the mother and child until they had no room to breathe? As a mother, she had to be strong. As a mother, even if she did not fight for herself, she had to fight for her child. The Empress Dowager lectured Imperial Concubine Yi in front of the Empress and Qin Yining, but Qin Yining and the Empress pretended not to see. Just as the situation became awkward, a palace maid came to the front of the hall and curtsied, bowing her head and saying, replying to the Empress Dowager, Anyang Princess Royal has arrived. Before the Empress Dowager could say anything, Li Helan quickly walked in. As he walked, he took off his fur cloak and threw it to the palace maid, saying with a smile, Muhu, you. Turning a corner, he bypassed the flying cover and came to the side hall. When he saw Qin Yining standing with the Empress, the smile on Li Helan's face immediately faded. Oh, what wind is this? How did it blow you here? Li Helan slowed his steps and reached out a slender white finger from his narrow sleeve that was covered in red fox fur. He disdainfully pointed at Qin Yining, curled his lips, and walked in a circle around Qin Yining. How come the south soil is so nourishing? You seem to have gained weight. Ha! That mocking and disdainful tone made people feel very uncomfortable. Qin Yining secretly shook his head. Li Helan's attitude was predictable. Ji Ziyu had won the battle, and as Ji Ziyu's wife, Li Helan was the most suitable candidate for the wedding ambassador. However, Your Majesty's decree chose her. Outsiders would not understand the twists and turns in this matter. They would only think that Your Majesty gave her honor and dignity. Li Helan was already full of hostility towards him. This time, it was really adding fuel to the fire. Qin Yining could already foresee that in the future, as long as he met Li Helan in the palace, nothing good would happen. Thank you for your concern, Princess Royal. This subject's wife has indeed gained a lot of weight. Ever since I had 2 children, this body is no longer something that I can control. Qin Yining was speaking the truth. But in Li Helan's ears, this truth sounded like he was showing off. Li Helan lived in the Princess Royal's palace. Ji Ziyu was either in the Prince Consort's palace or in the military camp. Otherwise, he would go out to fight. Although she kept a few gigolos, those men had always been submissive to her. They were not as domineering as Pang Xiao, nor were they as handsome as Ji Ziyu, who was as cold as ice. She had long been tired of them. Moreover, after playing around for a while, she had already seen through the matters between men and women. She was thinking about when she could have children with Ji Ziyu. Even if Ji Ziyu was not happy about her having gigolos, they were destined to be married and could not be separated. Qin Yining was now showing off in front of her. Who didn't know that good things came in pairs? She had given birth to 2 sons for Pang Xiao. This kind of good fortune was something that many people envied. Li Helan sneered and walked in front of Qin Yining. Is that so? Qin Yining became vigilant. His muscles tensed, but he nodded with a smile. Yes. Yes. Yes, my ass. Li Helan raised his foot and kicked Qin Yining's knee. Who told you to show off? You, ah. Before he could finish cursing, Li Helan was already holding one of his feet and hopping on one leg. In the end, he couldn't stand still and fell to the ground. Qin Yining looked at the three-legged copper furnace on the ground and felt pain for Li Helan. The Empress Dowager anxiously went to help Li Helan. What's wrong with you? You really are. The Empress Dowager didn't know what to say to Li Helan. Li Helan was in so much pain that he took a deep breath. He gritted his teeth and cursed, "Why are you hiding?" Qin Yining said, "Your Highness the Grand Princess stretched out her foot for no reason. This subject's status is lowly and doesn't dare to delay Your Highness the Grand Princess from resting. You did it on purpose." Obviously. Li Helan was so angry that he almost fainted. The Empress Dowager looked at Qin Yining with eyes full of anger. But today, it was Li Helan who kicked him first. It was understandable that Qin Yining dodged. Even if the Grand Princess was a noble, she wasn't the current emperor. She didn't have the right to say, "If the emperor wants a subject to die, the subject has no choice but to die." Qin Yining said with a smile, "Grand Princess, please calm down. This subject's wife still has some blood circulation and stasis-removing ointment. Tomorrow, I will send it to Your Highness' residence. I believe that your toe will be healed soon." Li Helan glared and snorted through his nostrils. His face was already distorted. The Empress Dowager saw that things were getting out of hand, so her face darkened and she said, "All right. Be a little more peaceful." Other than Li Helan, everyone else bowed their heads and didn't say anything. Li Helan stood up with the help of a palace maid and sat down on a rose chair with a cold expression. The Empress Dowager waved her hand at the Empress and Qin Yining. "You still have to go back and learn etiquette. Go now and don't delay. There's no need for you to wait here." The Empress calmly nodded and said, "Yes, this subject's wife and the princess will withdraw first." Qin Yining also bowed. The two of them left the hall one after the other, leaving Ci and Palace with their people. The Empress Dowager's face darkened completely. She glared at Li Helan and rolled her eyes at Imperial Concubine Yi. She took the initiative to say, "What's wrong with you two today? Do you think that you haven't lost enough face for Ijia?" She then used her index finger to push Li Helan's forehead. "Why did you become so terrified when you saw her? You couldn't win over a man, so you were stupid enough to kick her. You are the Grand Princess, a noble. Could it be that you don't know how to find fault with her and have the servants punish her? Do you think this is the same as when you fought with people in the village?" Li Helan suddenly came to a realization and blushed. "Imperial Mother, I was so angry that I became muddled. You also saw her proud appearance. Isn't it just giving birth to a pair of twins? What's there to be proud of?" "There's nothing to be proud of, but you didn't. And you." The Empress Dowager glared at Imperial Concubine Yi. "Your brain isn't enough. In the future, don't provoke Pang Zhao's wife. Do you think that Pang Zhao's wife is easy to provoke? If she really gets angry, even 10 of you together wouldn't be able to beat her. That's not it." Even the Empress was stepped on by Yun. What does a little princess count for? Auntie is too cautious." The Empress Dowager shook her head and impatiently waved her hand. "Do what you want. Don't drag Ijia down and embarrass Ijia." In the end, as soon as she said, "embarrass," a palace servant came in from outside. "Empress Dowager, the Empress has sent someone to invite Imperial Concubine Yi to Kuan Ning Palace to learn the rules." Chapter 769. Qin Yining and the Empress slowly walked towards Kuan Palace. The atmosphere was very relaxed. She used a lot of strength in that attack. The bronze cauldron is also very hard. I'm afraid she won't be able to walk now. The Empress turned to look at Qin Yining with a smile in her eyes. Qin Yining smiled and said, "I didn't touch her. She suffered the consequences of her own actions. Other people attacked for no reason. There's no reason for me to stand still and wait for others to bully me. Wang Yi must love you very much. Sometimes she really envied Qin Yining. She could live so freely. Thinking about it, only a woman who was doted on by her husband could do what she wanted to do without fear, right? Qin Yining looked at the Empress's bitter smile and knew what she was feeling. Her voice was calm as she said, "Actually, this has nothing to do with Wang Ye's love. I'm just borrowing the identity he gave me. If I had retreated in the slightest today, not only would it ruin Wang Ye's identity, it would also make people look down on me. In the future, when my child comes back to Jing, he will have to interact with people in this circle sooner or later. If other people think I'm powerful, even if they want to bully my child, they will have to think twice." Qin Yining was talking about herself, but at the same time, she was reminding the Empress. How could the Empress not understand Qin Yining's intention to persuade her? Her footsteps gradually stopped and she slowly turned to look at Qin Yining. When she met her gentle and encouraging gaze, her heart suddenly moved. Ben Gong understands Wang Fei's good intentions. The Empress faintly sighed. I also understand that if I don't live up to expectations, the one who will suffer in the future may be my son, but Ben Gong Fu understands Empress's difficulties. Ben Gong Fu also understands your feelings. But there will always be difficulties and unwillingness in life. There will always be some choices to be made. Either follow your heart or follow your reason. In fact, no matter what you choose, the future is unknown. The only difference is whether you have more or less control over it. For so many years, no one had ever talked to the Empress like this. Once, when Li Qitian was fighting outside, she served her mother-in-law and sister-in-law at home like an old cow. Later, when she became the Empress, her life was still the same. She was born in an ordinary family. There were only a group of relatives in her family who were not educated and did not know any great principles, but always wanted to benefit from her. No one could confide in her. No matter what happened, she had to figure it out by herself. Now that she was dispirited, she didn't think that there would still be someone who would be able to have a heart-to-heart talk with her regardless of their status. The Empress's emotions were almost indescribable. Wang Fei is a sentimental person. Ben Gong will carefully consider your words. Qin Yining saw that the Empress was not a stubborn and self-opinionated person. Her temperament was exceptionally gentle, and she was also well-educated and reasonable. Thus, he liked the Empress even more. Although their standpoints were different, at least for now, they could still get along peacefully. The two chatted along the way and walked slowly. When they returned to Kunning Palace, Sun Mama was already waiting in the main hall with Imperial concubine Yun, who had changed into a cloak. Imperial concubine Yun had changed into a yang fei-colored brocade cloak. Her entire person was as delicate as a spring peach. She was already impatient from waiting. Who would have thought that when the Empress sent someone to Ci and Palace to find her, she would have waited for so long in vain? Seeing the Empress return with Qin Yining, Imperial concubine Yun unwillingly curtsied and lazily said, "Greetings to the Empress." Qin Yining also bowed to Imperial concubine Yun with proper etiquette, "Greetings to Imperial concubine Yun." Both sides had done their etiquette, so there was nothing inappropriate. The Empress slowly walked into the hall and turned around to order Sun Mama, "Go invite Gong Mama over. Since you're going to learn the rules today, this consort can also follow along and learn." "Yes." Sun Mama went to the door and ordered a palace maid to invite her over. The Empress ordered for them to be seated. Qin Yining and Imperial concubine Yun sat according to their status. When Gong Mama arrived, the three of them began to learn from Gong Mama. Nanny Gong was over 60 years old. When she was in the Beiji Kingdom, she was the nanny who taught the rules of the concubines in the palace. She had served several concubines, and the one with the highest rank was the imperial noble consort, so she knew the rules and etiquette of some ceremonies very well. Qin Yining had an excellent memory, so she was able to quickly learn what Gong Mama taught her. Because she had learned from Zhang Mama in Dian, although the customs of the two countries were different, many of the rules were similar. Therefore, it was not difficult for Qin Yining to learn. She knew how to walk, sit, and lie down. She knew how to eat and drink daily. She even knew the rules when speaking. Gong Mama was very detailed. The Empress and Imperial concubine Yun both listened. She could not urge the two masters of the palace too much. Sometimes, she would check on Qin Yining's results. What surprised and impressed Gong Mama was that as long as she repeated the rules to Qin Yining once, she would not make any mistakes. In comparison, Imperial concubine Yun's qualifications were much worse. Her salutes were not standard and she refused to change. She was so proud that she could not accept any criticism. After a few days, Qin Yining had learned most of the rules. However, Imperial concubine Yun did not make much progress. Perhaps it was not that she could not learn, but that she did not like the Empress and felt that she would lose face if she behaved properly in front of the Empress. Prince Zhongshuan's Imperial concubine is truly intelligent. You have no problem with the etiquette of receiving the bride. However, the existence of etiquette and rules is to make people's eyes light up when they see you. When they interact with you, they feel like they are bathing in the spring breeze. Thus, the Imperial concubine still needs to use the rules that you have learned. In your daily life, in your every action and speech, you need to be subtly influenced. This way, the rules and etiquette will become something that belongs to you and will inadvertently reveal your brilliance and bearing. The things that this servant has taught are all based on ancient etiquette. Once you grasp them, not only will your bearing change, this is also a type of inheritance. In the future, it can influence the next generation. Yes, I've remembered everything that Granny Gong said. I will learn and correct them in my daily life. However, if I am distracted, I will not be able to take care of them. Gong Mama saw that Qin Yining was so honest and couldn't help but smile as she said, "This is human nature. It is not that easy to change a habit. Learning the rules is actually forming a new habit." Gong Mama and Qin Yining chatted happily while Imperial concubine Yun pursed her lips and practiced several salutes. She now understood that the Empress had brought her into Cunning Palace to learn the rules. It was clear that she wanted to torment her. These days, she was so tired that her waist and back hurt. Even when she served His Majesty, she was so tired that she couldn't help but yawn. She had almost made Your Majesty think that she was impatient to serve him. Imperial concubine Yun gritted her teeth and glared at the Empress, who was listening intently to Qin Yining and Gong Mama. Right at this time, Sun Mama came in with a smile and bowed, saying, "Reporting to Your Highness, the eldest prince has woken up and is asking for his mother." Hearing this, the Empress's face lit up. Even her haggard face lit up a bit. Chapter 770. Qin Yining smiled and nodded. The eldest prince was 3 months younger than her two darlings. Now, her Han and Zhao were almost 1 year old. Thinking of this, Qin Yining could not suppress the longing that she had been suppressing all this time. She missed her children, and she missed Pang Xiao very much. Her eyes became soft and full of longing. The Empress, who was also a mother, saw this and patted her arm understandingly. Qin Yining came back to her senses and smiled slightly at the Empress. At this time, Nurse Sun led a group of people in. "Your Majesty, the eldest prince is here." The leader was a wet nurse in her 20s wearing a dark green palace dress. She had a delicate face and held a red swaddling cloth in her arms. She knelt and saluted, "The eldest prince pays his respects to Your Majesty. Quickly get up and bring Hao over for this Empress to see." "Yes." The wet nurse got up and with the help of the other wet nurses, she tidied up the red swaddling cloth that covered the baby's face. Then, she handed the little baby, who was wearing a light pink brocade jacket and a tiger head hat, to the Empress. The baby was fair and clean. Qin Yining looked at him from the side and smelled the soft milky fragrance on the baby's body. She thought of her two darlings and almost cried. She controlled her emotions and could not lose her composure. What? She was not happy to see the prince. If this was used against her, she was afraid that it would cause trouble in the future. Qin Yining smiled and said, "His little highness is so cute and has delicate features. He must be an intelligent and filial child." What mother did not like to hear her child being praised? The Empress suddenly felt that Qin Yining was even closer. She was not young anymore and was not favored by your majesty. She was afraid that she would not have the chance to have another child in the future. This child was her lifeblood. The Empress happily hugged the child and brought him to Qin Yining. "Look, he is smiling at you." The little prince stretched out his small white hand that was wearing a silver bracelet and waved it. He was smiling and drooling. Qin Yining was very fond of it. He took off the gold and ruby cloud necklace around his neck and presented it to the little prince with both hands. "Your Highness, this is this subject's gift to His Highness for our first meeting. I hope that Your Highness will not dislike it. I wish that His Highness will be smart and healthy, safe and healthy, and grow up healthily." Qin Yining's words were simple, but they were exactly what all mothers hoped for their children. When all the mothers in the world had their own children, their initial hope was that their children would grow up healthily and safely, especially women who lived deep in the palace. The Empress could feel Qin Yining's sincerity. She smiled and took the necklace and compared it with the little prince's body. "I thank you on behalf of Brother Hao." When Qin Yining heard the Empress refer to herself as "I," he knew that this was the sincere gratitude of a mother and not the Empress. The two of them huddled together and played with the child. The palace servants at the side were also laughing. The first prince was also exceptionally happy today. His giggling made him look especially cute, and the people around him felt their hearts soften. Imperial concubine Yun could no longer practice her etiquette. She gritted her teeth and hid all her jealousy. An old and ugly woman. What was so great about giving birth to a son? It was as if no one could give birth. In the future, she would definitely give birth to more and better children. Imperial concubine Yun also walked to the Empress' side and stretched her neck to look at the prince in the Empress' arms. The baby with the fragrance of milk was indeed cute. His smiling appearance made people's hearts soften. But in addition to the softness, an unprecedented jealousy was like a raging fire that ignited her entire body. This child was so cute. Your Majesty must be in great pain, right? If this child was allowed to grow up safely, then when she had another child in the future, wouldn't she have no chance? If this child died, then that would be good. Or if he was crippled or disfigured, anything would be good. As long as this child had no fate with the throne. Imperial concubine Yun's jade-like hand, covered in bright red nail polish, reached for the child's face as if she was possessed. Her ring finger and pinky finger wore silver armor with a pearl at the sharp end. The sharp end was almost touching the child's cheek. The Empress' side was facing Imperial concubine Yun, so she couldn't see clearly. As for the other palace servants, even if they could see clearly, the other party was the Empress Dowager's niece, so everyone hesitated for a moment. Only Sun Mama, who was loyal and devoted to the Empress, cried out in alarm. However, she was too far away, and she was also old. Encountering such a situation, she was already flustered. She only knew how to scream, but there was no substance to it. The Empress was startled by Sun Mama's shout. She lowered her head and saw a hand with a warm jade ring firmly grabbing a hand with silver armor. The tip of the armor, decorated with pearls, was right next to the eldest prince's right cheek. If it had moved forward half an inch, it would have pierced the child's face. What are you doing? The Empress hugged the child and quickly dodged. Qin Yining angrily glared at Imperial Concubine Yun. Her eyes were like ice as she gradually tightened her grip on her hand. Through gritted teeth, she said, Imperial Concubine Yun, can you bear the crime of harming a prince? This one did not. Let go of me, aw. Imperial Concubine Yun woke up from a dream and quickly tried to pull her hand back. However, no matter how much strength she used, she couldn't pull out Qin Yining's fingers that were like iron pliers. She couldn't think of a reason. They were both women, but Qin Yining's strength was so great. Qin Yining missed her children. Looking at the eldest prince was like looking at Zhao Gu and Han Gu in swaddling clothes. As a mother, how could she stand someone wanting to harm her children? Even if it wasn't her child, a person with a bit of humanity wouldn't harm an ignorant infant. For a moment, she couldn't care about anything else. Qin Yining grabbed Imperial Concubine Yun's hand and twisted it, trapping her hand behind her back. Imperial Concubine Yun screamed in pain. Due to the strength of her arm, she could only bend at the waist. Her other hand tried to pull on Qin Yining's hair, but Qin Yining only used a bit of force, causing her to twist her body to the side in pain. You dare! Let go of this concubine. This concubine is an imperial concubine. If you dare to touch this concubine, I'll kill you. You're the one who doesn't want to live. You dared to touch the eldest prince in front of everyone. What are your intentions? This concubine didn't. You're falsely accusing this concubine. This concubine only wanted to touch the eldest prince's cheek. How could this be harming someone? This was the palace. Qin Yining wasn't in charge. If someone dared to touch her son, Qin Yining would have broken that evil hand long ago. Qin Yining shook her hand and released the strength in her grip. Imperial Concubine Yun struggled and rushed forward. She stumbled and fell to the ground, holding her arm. Her face was deathly pale and she almost cried out in pain. You dare! This concubine will go tell the Empress Dowager. The Empress tightly hugged her son and angrily said, You can go and see if the Empress Dowager loves her own grandson or you. Her angry roar was very sharp. The child who was originally giggling was scared into crying. The Empress coaxed the child with heartache. She patted the eldest prince's back and whispered, Good Hao Ji, don't cry, don't cry. She turned and angrily glared at Imperial Concubine Yun, who was being helped up. She coldly said, You dared to touch someone in front of this concubine. How can I tolerate such a vicious person? Servants. This servant is here. Sun Mama and the servants of Cunning Palace responded. Tie up Imperial Concubine Yun for this concubine and hand her over to the Imperial Clan Court. Yes. Sun Mama rolled up her sleeves and walked forward with 2 palace maids to tie up Imperial Concubine Yun. Imperial Concubine Yun cried out in pain, Let go of me. What right do you have to say that I wanted to touch the prince? Which eye of yours saw it? I only wanted to touch the eldest prince's cheek. It was the Prince Zhongshuan's concubine. Yes, she framed me. With so many pairs of eyes watching, you still dare to quibble. The Empress was furious. It seems that this concubine has been too lenient with you all. That's why you all are so daring. This concubine only thought that the eldest prince was cute and wanted to touch him. It's true that this concubine has armor on her hands, but this concubine is already an adult. Naturally, this concubine would avoid it. How could this concubine hurt the eldest prince? It was clearly the Prince Zhongshuan's concubine who framed me. Take her away. The Empress flicked her sleeves. Sun Mama immediately obeyed and took her away. Imperial Concubine Yun continued to struggle, shouting, I didn't. There are so many of you and you're all venting your anger. You're all working together to slander me. Empress, aren't you afraid of retribution for framing people like this? The Empress angrily said, you deliberately hurt a baby in swaddling clothes. Although you failed, you still wanted to kill him. Aren't you afraid of retribution? Do you dare to swear on your future child? Imperial concubine Yun choked and her words were blocked. Seeing Imperial concubine Yun being taken away, the Empress hurriedly coaxed the child. When the eldest prince cried, the Empress's heart ached and she also shed tears. She muttered, it's Imperial Mother who is useless. It's all Imperial Mother's fault. If it wasn't for Imperial Mother being so weak, how could anyone dare to hurt you in front of Imperial Mother? It's all Imperial Mother's fault. Seeing the Empress holding the eldest prince, mother and son crying together, Qin Yining couldn't bear it inside. In fact, the Empress' punishment for Imperial concubine Yun was too unwise. Just as Imperial concubine Yun said, even if her actions were caught by Qin Yining, the eldest prince's face didn't have any injuries. In fact, there were many things she could refute. Even if everyone present came forward to testify, it still wouldn't pass the Empress Dowager's eyes. Releasing Imperial concubine Yun was only a matter of a word from the Empress Dowager. If she was used by someone with ulterior motives, she was afraid that she would also be implicated. She would be accused of sowing discord between concubines. However, under the Empress' anger, there was nothing she could do. She also couldn't find a position to persuade her. If she tried to persuade her at this time, it would only make the Empress even angrier. It would also make her efforts over the past few days go to waste. Qin Yining was a free and easy person. Although she understood the development of the situation, she didn't care too much. In any case, her crime was the same as Imperial concubine Yun's. If she was accused of deliberately framing someone, the other party also didn't have any evidence. It was just a matter of 50 strikes. In any case, no matter how good her performance was, the fact that Li Qitian was afraid of Pang Xiao didn't change. Chapter 771. The Empress nodded. After coaxing him for a while, she handed the prince, who had gradually stopped crying, to the wet nurse. She didn't let the wet nurse leave and only had a few people move the prince's bedding and cradle to her bedchamber. The Empress used her sleeve to wipe her tears. Holding Qin Yining's hand, she walked to the warm couch by the window and sat down. Qin Yining held the Empress's hand with both hands and stood in front of her. He gently comforted her. Nyang doesn't need to blame yourself. Today's matter is a reminder to you. You just need to be careful in the future. The Empress shook her head. The golden tassel behind her head swayed with her movements. Yining, can I call you that? Qin Yining heard the Empress refer to herself as I and nodded with a smile. He relaxed a bit and said, of course you can. The Empress sniffed and had Qin Yining sit down on the embroidered stool in front of her. She said, I've been thinking about what you said that day. I also know that what you said is right. People say that a mother is strong. The logic is clear, but it's hard to actually do it. However, today's matter is the same as putting the reality in front of me. Those people, they all don't like me sitting in this position. I admit, I'm already old. It wasn't easy for me to get a brother at this age. I'm afraid I won't have any other children in the future. I'm filial to my mother-in-law, love my sister-in-law, and tolerate the concubines. But they want to hurt my only son. When the Empress said this, tears once again streamed down her face. I've retreated again and again, but they aren't willing to let me and my child live in peace. Qin Yining saw the Empress cry sadly and couldn't help but feel his nose ache. He took the handkerchief that a palace maid offered and presented it to the Empress with both hands. Nyang, you know that if you retreat again and again, it will only make the villains more arrogant. Qin Yining lowered his voice. People like Imperial concubine Yun are the easiest to deal with. She does things impulsively and doesn't use her brain. But the Taytan Princess Tana is coming. There will be an election in the new year. In the future, there will be more and more young and beautiful concubines in the palace. There will also be more and more people with different personalities and backgrounds. Nyang Nyang also needs to be strong and think of ways to protect yourself and the prince. The Empress nodded. She knew that Qin Yining was speaking from the bottom of his heart. She couldn't help but sigh, "You're right. In the future, I have to be strong and make plans for my child. I just feel tired and disheartened." Nyang Nyang, as women, although we have to take care of our husbands and children, we can't put everything on this. Before we do anything for our husbands and children, we can't forget that we are human. You have to take care of yourself first and let yourself live well. Only then will you have the energy to do other things, don't you think so? This was the first time the Empress had heard of such a thing. What she had seen were women who depended on men to survive, who sacrificed their entire lives for their husbands and children, and who were mercilessly abandoned after committing 7 sins. Even if she did not commit the 7 sins, she was still a newlywed for only 1 or 2 years. The husband would still have to take in concubines and take in handmaidens. If she did not allow it, she would be jealous. No one had ever told her that she was a human being before her husband and children. She felt that this explanation was novel, but it also enlightened her. The woman in front of her was not even 20 years old, but she was so intelligent and quick-witted. She was scheming and shrewd, but she was also very kind. The Empress actually had some understanding of the situation in court. She also knew that Your Majesty was wary of Pang Shao. Logically speaking, it was very difficult for the two of them to have a heart-to-heart. However, Qin Yining did not care about these things. He only dealt with the matter as it was. Because he could not bear to see his child suffer, he did not care about the grudges of the previous generation. He also did not care if he offended Imperial Concubine Yun or the Empress Dowager. Before other people could react, or rather, when other people did not dare to stop him, he reached out a helping hand to his child. The Empress found it hard to imagine what would have happened to her child's face if Qin Yining did not care about this matter today. Such a young child, if he suffered such an injury, would he get a fever and leave a scar? In reality, Qin Yining could have just watched from the side and not gotten involved in the trouble. But she did it. The Empress' heart was filled with emotion. Putting aside the grudges between men, from her perspective, she admired and loved Qin Yining very much. "You're right." The Empress wiped away her tears, her gaze becoming firm. "Many thanks. In every sense of the word. Your Highness, there's no need for this. This is what this subject's wife should do, whether it's out of loyalty or out of humanity." The two looked at each other and smiled. Their feelings seemed to have grown a bit closer. The Empress was more than 10 years older than Qin Yining, but she had learned a lot from Qin Yining. She couldn't help but discuss with him, "If we send Imperial Concubine Yun to the Imperial Clan Court today, I'm afraid the Empress Dowager will not let this go." Qin Yining nodded. "That's right. Your Highness should know that even if we send Imperial Concubine Yun to the Imperial Clan Court, she will be released very quickly. After all, the Empress Dowager cared about her face. She had supported Imperial Concubine Yun in order to compete with the Empress. Now that such an inconceivable matter had occurred, the Empress Dowager naturally had to protect her. Otherwise, it was fine if Imperial Concubine Yun fell, but if the Empress Dowager and her family were implicated, wouldn't they lose face? The Empress heard this and sighed silently. How could she not understand her mother-in-law who had been with her for so many years? After the Empress Dowager released Imperial Concubine Yun, she would most likely bite back and say that she had deliberately framed her and was ashamed of being the Empress. The Empress had just raised her ambition, but when she thought of the Empress Dowager, she became dispirited again. She had never felt so tired before. What could she do? As the Empress, she didn't even have the power to manage the harem. Everything was decided by the Empress Dowager. Even if she caught someone framing her child, there would be bad consequences if she punished that person. It was truly tiring. The Empress asked tiredly, "In your opinion, how should this matter be handled?" Qin Yining thought about it and smiled. The result of this matter, the Empress should have guessed it when she ordered Imperial concubine Yun to be locked up in the Imperial clan court. As a mother, it is natural for her to stand up for His Highness. So no matter what the consequences are, you should just accept it. Imperial concubine Yun will definitely be protected by the Empress Dowager. As for you, as long as Imperial concubine Yun is willing to reflect on herself, this matter will only affect a few people in the harem and let them know your position. This is a very good result. The Empress lowered her eyes and pondered for a moment. Then she said, "Later, you accompany me. Let's take Mama Gong and go to the Empress Dowager's palace." Qin Yining said, "The Empress is witty. At least by doing this, the Empress will establish an open and upright image in the eyes of Li Qitian. This is equivalent to stopping the loss in time. No matter how this matter should be handled, the result won't be so bad that she will lose her life. This is already very good. How is it that I am witty?" The Empress stood up and regained her dignity and elegance as the Empress. "It is that you are willing to help. Thank you very much." Qin Yining hurriedly stood up and bowed, saying that he didn't dare. The two of them dressed neatly and chatted with Mama Gong for a while. Mama Gong was a mama who taught the rules. She didn't belong to any particular palace. She had already retired from the harem and was invited back by Your Majesty's decree. Her status was very high, so naturally, there was no problem of favoritism. The Empress spoke gently and in detail. For the sake of the cute child, Mama Gong naturally nodded. The group of people soon arrived at Xi'an Palace. When the palace servant reported, Li Helan and the Empress Dowager were sitting next to each other, eating melon seeds and chatting about daily life. As soon as she heard that the Empress wanted to see her, the Empress Dowager unhappily threw the melon seeds in her hand on the table. What is she doing here at this time? Who is coming? Empress Dowager, the Empress came with Prince Zhongshuan's consort. When Li Helan heard Qin Yining, his swollen toes reflexively hurt. When that bitch comes together, there must be something bad. Imperial Mother, last time she caused my toenails to be chopped off. You must avenge me. The Empress Dowager snorted, "Isn't it because you are stupid? Who told you to kick people yourself? Idiot, you have a head on your neck. Do you only use it to breathe?" When the Empress Dowager reprimanded Li Helan, she waved her hand. The palace servant immediately understood and went outside to invite the Empress in. Li Helan curled his lips, sat up straight, and then wiped his mouth with a handkerchief. When the Empress came in with Qin Yining, she immediately gave a big bow. Qinxia pays respect to Mother. Qinxia pays respect to Empress Dowager. Qinxia pays respect to Princess Royal. Get up. The Empress Dowager waved her hand and motioned for the two to get up. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw Mama Gong behind the crowd. The Empress Dowager raised her eyebrows in confusion. What's the matter? Why did you come to my place at this time? The Empress said, yes. Just now, Consort Yun was learning the rules in Qinxia's palace. During the break, Qinxia ordered the wet nurse to bring Hao Ji-er here. Consort Yun intended to scratch Hao Ji-er's face. Qinxia has ordered people to take Consort Yun to the Imperial clan court. The Empress Dowager was stunned. Where is Hao Ji-er? How is he? Seeing that the Empress Dowager was first concerned about her grandson, the Empress secretly let out a sigh of relief and said, Nyang Nyang, don't worry. Fortunately, the loyal Qin Wang Fei found out in time and caught Consort Yi on the spot. How Ji was safe and sound, but he was frightened and kept crying. When the Empress Dowager heard this, she calmed down a little. How brainless is Consort Yun to directly try to scratch Prince Zhongshuan's face in front of so many people? Even a fool wouldn't do such a thing. The Empress Dowager looked suspiciously at the Empress. You are so anxious to lock up Consort Yun. Is there a hidden reason, N? The Empress's heart that had just been a little relieved was raised again by the Empress Dowager's words. She suddenly had a sure enough thought in her heart. Qin Yining was right. The Empress Dowager really began to favor Consort Yun. The Empress Dowager pursed her lips. Could it be that Empress Dowager suspects Qinxia is using this matter to slander Consort Yun? So many people saw it. If the Empress Dowager doesn't believe it, you can go and ask them one by one. Moreover, Qinxia and the Empress Dowager have been together for so many years. The Empress Dowager should know Qinxia's character. If Consort Yun didn't really hurt Prince Zhongshuan, why would Qinxia say that? The Empress Dowager was a little hesitant. Although this daughter-in-law wasn't likable and was like a block of wood, as she said, she was a very upright person. Could it really be Consort Yun who did it? To do such a stupid thing, Consort Yun was really possible. Chapter 772. The Empress Dowager lowered her eyes and fiddled with the scattered melon seeds on the table. If she were to find another woman as beautiful and easy to manipulate as Imperial Concubine Yun, it would not be so easy. Li Helan had already sneered, Imperial sister-in-law is really interesting. Since this happened in your cunning palace, the people around you are all your people. Big sister Yun Fei is alone and weak. Isn't it all up to you guys to say whatever you want? Imperial Concubine Yun is not stupid. How could she harm the eldest prince in front of so many people? Even if you want to make up a lie, you should make up a better one to convince Imperial Mother. You really don't care when slandering people. After ridiculing, Li Helan grabbed some melon seeds to eat. The crunching sound of the melon seeds made the Empress Dowager laugh. That's right. Harming an imperial heir is a serious crime. Even if someone is daring, they still have to do it behind people's backs. How could they do it in front of people? Empress, Aijia knows that you don't like Imperial Concubine Yun, but you shouldn't treat everyone as fools. The Empress was so anxious that her face turned red. Empress Dowager, if Qinxia is lying, Qinxia will die a horrible death. Imperial Concubine Yun did try to use her sharp armor to scratch Hao Ji-er's face when Qinxia wasn't on guard. How old is Hao Ji-er? What if his face is injured and he has a fever? Even if she can't harm Hao Ji-er's life, if the wound leaves a scar, it will cut off Hao Ji-er's future. Imperial Concubine Yun thought that everyone would think the same as you and the eldest princess, so she acted without restraint. Qinxia wasn't the only one who saw this. Prince Zhongshuan's consort was also there, and Mama Gong was also there. They and the palace servants at the time can testify. The Empress Dowager frowned and looked at Qin Yining. Jishi's wife's words can be trusted. What do you say? After listening for a while, Qin Yining realized that the Empress Dowager was just deliberately playing with the Empress. The Empress Dowager was now the ruler of the harem. The Empress Dowager was not as scheming and ambitious as her. She was too lazy to manage things and did not have enough connections. In order to consolidate her power, the Empress Dowager naturally supported Imperial Concubine Yun. Whether Imperial Concubine Yun was innocent or not, Imperial Concubine Yun was innocent in the Empress Dowager's eyes. Qin Yining already knew this result before she came. However, she was just a woman with a title and not someone who had the final say. It was not good for her to excessively advise the Empress in case it had the opposite effect. Therefore, she could only watch as the Empress hurriedly did something that would definitely slap her own face. That's right. Qin Yining had foreseen that the Empress would be slapped in the face today. This was because the first prince had not truly been injured. Even if so many people had seen it, the other party would still have a reason to quibble. The only benefit that this incident brought to the Empress was that she understood how unwise it was to hastily make a move on her opponent before she had solid evidence and no one could refute it. Qin Yining's mind was spinning. She bowed and said, "This subject's wife only has one position in her heart. That side is to be loyal to your majesty and to Dezhou. Therefore, this subject's words do not contain any bias." What the Empress said was true. The Empress Dowager was choked by her words. She had wanted to scold Qin Yining for deliberately slandering imperial concubine Yun to curry favor with the Empress, but she had been blocked by her words. Li Helan didn't care about this. She laughed mockingly and said, "Don't flatter yourself. Even if you want to be loyal, there's no place for you to be. You're just a woman, and you want to learn from men to be loyal. Who do you think you are?" Qin Yining smiled and said to Li Helan, "Your Highness, eldest princess, you are judging others by your own standards. This subject's wife is not talented, but she still did her best during the palace coup." The eldest princess stared at Qin Yining and did not say anything. When Li Qitian was able to return to the palace and take control of the situation, the Qin Tian alliance played an important role. She had forgotten that Qin Yining was some bullshit alliance head. Qin Yining turned to the Empress Dowager and said, "Your Highness, the Empress Dowager should understand that this subject's wife is not in a position to be biased. When this subject's wife grabbed imperial concubine Yun's hand, it was only because of my love and care for the child. I could not bear to see a small baby suffer. That is all." The Empress Dowager already believed her. It was just as Qin Yining said. Your Majesty had the intention to target Pang Xiao. Outsiders did not know about this, but everyone present knew the inside story. Qin Yining was a woman with an external title and did not interact much with the palace. There was no need for her to lie in order to curry favor with the Empress. Even if she tried to curry favor with the Empress, if Your Majesty made a move in the future, the Empress would not be able to help her. Moreover, the Empress Dowager understood imperial concubine Yun's temper and knew that the Empress was a righteous person. But so what if she believed her? The Empress Dowager calmly said, "Forget it. No matter how big the matter was, it was fine as long as the prince's face was fine. Moreover, imperial concubine Yun might not have done it. Even if she did, it could have been someone else who set her up. As the Empress Dowager, this widow must handle matters in the palace impartially. This widow cannot make a conclusion based on the Empress's one-sided words. Moreover, there were many of you at the time. If each of you said something, how could imperial concubine Yun defend herself? Wasn't it you who randomly came up with the charges? How about this? This widow will have imperial concubine Yun apologize to you." After saying this, the Empress Dowager immediately ordered people to go to the imperial clan court's prison, release imperial concubine Yun. If she asks, say that this is this widow's idea and that this widow has something to ask. Yes. A palace servant immediately responded and quickly went to the imperial clan court to pick up imperial concubine Yun. The Empress looked at the smug faces of the Empress Dowager and eldest princess, and her heart had already turned cold. This was her mother-in-law. For her own selfish interests, she could disregard her own grandson. In order to raise her own niece against her daughter-in-law, she could disregard everything. She didn't care about her face, and she didn't care about her own face. When she had lived in the countryside before, she had never seen the Empress Dowager as such a person. Who knew that some people could share trials and tribulations, but not riches and honor? The Empress' nose turned sour and tears welled up in her eyes. She almost cried on the spot. If it wasn't for her tightly clenching her fists and digging her nails into her palms, reminding herself not to lose face in front of others, she really wouldn't have been able to hold it in. Not long after, the servants of Ci and Palace brought Imperial Concubine Yun back. In fact, when Imperial Concubine Yun arrived at the Imperial Clan Court, before she was locked up, she was quickly brought back. Her heart had been filled with fear. If the Empress Dowager found out that she had done such an impulsive thing, she was afraid she wouldn't be let off easily. Who would have thought that before she could suffer, she would be brought back by the Empress Dowager? In the end, they were her relatives. Even if she poked a hole in the sky, the Empress Dowager would be able to support her. With this thought, Imperial Concubine Yun's expression was filled with pride when she stepped into Ci and Palace. Seeing the Empress standing there with a pale face, Imperial Concubine Yun twisted her waist and walked forward. This concubine greets the Empress Dowager and the Empress. No need. The Empress Dowager waved her hand. Seeing that Imperial Concubine Yun had clearly done something stupid, she didn't need to guess to know what she was thinking. Suppressing her anger, the Empress Dowager said, "Imperial Concubine Yun, tell us what happened at that time. Did you really dare to harm the Imperial heir?" "Empress Dowager, you mustn't listen to these slanderous words. How could this concubine harm the Imperial heir? The eldest prince is the Empress Dowager's grandson and your Majesty's legitimate son. Even if this concubine had 100 guts, she wouldn't dare to do such a thing. Moreover, this concubine isn't stupid. With so many people present, would this concubine dare to make a move? If this concubine wanted to make a move, shouldn't this concubine choose a time when no one is present?" Imperial Concubine Yun glared at the Empress and pitifully said, "The Empress has never liked this concubine. These days, she has been making things difficult for this concubine. This concubine has been enduring, but who would have thought that in the end, I would be bidden? This concubine is really wronged." Imperial Concubine Yun knelt on the ground and began to cry, as if she had really suffered a great grievance. The Empress was so angry at Imperial Concubine Yun's shameless behavior that her whole body trembled. Her eyes were red as she glared at Imperial Concubine Yun. "Imperial Concubine Yun, the heavens are watching what people do. Whether or not you deliberately wanted to scratch Hao Jie's face, you know it in your heart, everyone present saw it, and even the heavens know it. You speak without thinking, saying that this concubine is falsely accusing you. Do you not feel guilty at all?" Imperial Concubine Yun fearlessly twisted her waist and shook her head. "Empress Dowager, take a look. This is how the Empress intimidates this concubine. If this concubine didn't have the Empress Dowager's support, I'm afraid that this concubine would have been skinned alive and eaten until not even bones were left." Imperial Concubine Yun turned around and repeatedly kowtowed to the Empress. "Empress, please spare this concubine. This concubine is only a small concubine. Although the Emperor dotes on this concubine, you are the Empress, the wife of the first wife. You have the good fortune to have a prince. This concubine has nothing. What is so good about this concubine that the Empress is jealous of? Why must you frame this concubine and kill this concubine?" When Imperial Concubine Yun finished speaking, her forehead was pressed to the ground and she began to sob loudly. The Empress was so angry that her whole body trembled. She turned to look at the Empress Dowager. "The Empress Dowager is clear. This concubine really has no need to lie. If Imperial Concubine Yun did not do such a stupid thing, why would this concubine use such a thing to accuse Imperial Concubine Yun? Everyone here is proof. Empress Dowager, please investigate." The Empress Dowager shook her head, as Imperial Concubine Yun said, "Everyone in Cunning Palace is your people. Aren't they all speaking up for you? Empress, this widow normally sees you as an honest person. I never thought that you would do such a jealous thing." The Empress tightly bit her lower lip, feeling wronged to the extreme. Tears finally silently flowed down her face. Qin Yining watched from the back and couldn't help shaking his head. The Empress was too emotional and still had hope for the Empress Dowager and the others. That was why she had fallen into such an unbearable situation. She couldn't accept reality, so from the beginning of the conversation, she couldn't grasp the main point and fell into a disadvantage. Chapter 773. The Empress's heart was beating fast, and she suddenly looked up at the Empress Dowager. The Empress Dowager was so greedy. She didn't think it was enough to control the power, and she also wanted to control the prince. The Empress Dowager's eyebrows were smiling, and she had the smile of a winner. Fight with her. Even if the Empress's family was put together, they were still not her opponent. The Empress's tears poured down, and she took several deep breaths to stop sobbing. Brother Hao was almost killed in front of her eyes. If he left her sight, who could guarantee his safety? It was a good thing that he fell into the Empress Dowager's hands and was taught astray. If he was not careful, he would lose his life. Empress Dowager. The Empress's voice was hoarse and sharp. She wanted to argue. She could not lose her son. Who would have thought that at this moment, her sleeve would be gently pulled by someone? She was reminded by this action, and her reason gradually recovered. She quickly squeezed out a smile. Empress Dowager, your health is important. Taking care of the child is tiring, so Qinxia should do it herself. Moreover, although Qinxia arranged a wet nurse for the eldest prince, this child is very clingy to me. Qinxia occasionally needs to breastfeed him. It doesn't matter whose milk he drinks. It's not like there are no wet nurses in this palace. Even if there are none, our children who used to eat porridge and soup in the countryside can't grow up. The Empress Dowager's attitude was very tough. Was she speaking human words? The Empress was angry. If she didn't have some reason left, she would have rushed over and torn apart the Empress Dowager's mouth. The Empress Dowager was clearly only doing it for herself. She didn't even care about her own grandson. She was blind. They lived together for so many years. How could she not realize that the Empress Dowager was such a selfish person who ignored family relations? The Empress couldn't bear it and almost wanted to die together with the Empress Dowager. At this time, Qin Yining bowed and said, Empress Dowager, Qinxia thinks that this matter needs to be reported to Your Majesty before making a decision. Although Your Majesty doesn't interfere in the affairs of the harem, the little prince is Your Majesty's only legitimate son. Your Majesty must cherish him very much. After asking, do according to Your Majesty's wishes. It won't hurt each other's feelings. Qin Yining's words were gentle, but they hit the nail on the head and reminded the Empress. Today's matter was being dealt with by the Empress Dowager behind closed doors. How she wanted Imperial concubine Yi to be manipulated was all up to the Empress Dowager. But what if Li Qitian heard about it? Although the Empress was old, she was still respected by Li Qitian. Otherwise, Li Qitian's first child would not be a legitimate son. There were many beautiful concubines in the womb. Just based on this point, the Empress' words had weight in Li Qitian's ears. If the Empress told Li Qitian that his legitimate son was almost killed, how would Li Qitian deal with it? Even if he didn't completely believe her, planting a seed of doubt in his heart was enough to annoy Imperial concubine Yun. Moreover, because of the Marquis of Qingyang colluding with Prince Li in the coup in the palace last time, Li Qitian was clearly dissatisfied with the Empress Dowager. The Empress Dowager had been careful with her words and actions in the palace these days. Wasn't it to pull the relationship between mother and son closer? If he knew that his birth mother only cared about her niece at the critical moment and did not care about her own grandson, wouldn't everything the Empress Dowager had done be for naught? The Empress suddenly understood. At this time, the Empress Dowager looked at Qin Yining as if she wanted to eat him. Imperial concubine Yi and Li Helan also put away their complacent expressions. They knew that the Empress would tell your Majesty no matter what. The atmosphere was so cold that it seemed to freeze into ice. The Empress had a pillar of support. Wiping away her tears, she bowed and said, "Chinchilla thinks these words are reasonable. After all, the Empress Dowager is old. If she wants to take care of an infant, her strength will fall short of her desire. Chinchilla does not want the Empress Dowager to be too tired. If she is exhausted, wouldn't it be Chinchilla's fault? The Empress Dowager has worked hard all her life and should enjoy her later years. As for your Majesty, if your Majesty is willing to hand the eldest prince over to the Empress Dowager, Chinchilla will send the child over." At this point, the Empress added, "At worst, Chinchilla will move to the Empress Dowager's CI and palace and help the Empress Dowager look after the child. The two of us can be companions, don't you think?" The Empress Dowager was so angry that she gasped for breath. She angrily glared at the Empress and then fiercely rolled her eyes at Qin Yining. Asked the Emperor. If this matter was brought to the Emperor, it would definitely hurt the enemy by 1,000 but also hurt herself by 800. Forget it. You should take care of the eldest prince yourself. Aijia is also tired of the child crying. Yes. The Empress was overjoyed. This was the first time she had the upper hand in front of the Empress Dowager. However, today's mistake of framing imperial concubine Yi cannot be forgotten. The Empress Dowager continued with a heavy expression. The Empress Dowager is right. Without waiting for the Empress Dowager to finish speaking, Qin Yining said, "Who is framing, who is quibbling, and who is reneging, these are all things that have not been determined yet. Since this dynasty has the imperial clan court, it is better to completely hand this matter over to the imperial clan court and not let anyone suffer. Although Chinchilla is not talented, I am willing to testify. If the imperial clan court cannot resolve this matter, there is still the Ministry of Justice and the Supreme Court. There will always be a place to reason. As long as the Empress Dowager felt that the imperial family could afford to lose this face." The Empress Dowager angrily glared and fiercely slammed the table. "How dare you? Qin clan, don't think that just because you are Pang Zhishi's Wangfei, you can stand tall in front of Aijia. You are still far from that." Qin Yining took the opportunity to kneel and salute. "Empress Dowager, please calm your anger. Chinchilla was only making a suggestion. Whether or not to do it is up to the Empress and Empress Dowager. Since the Empress Dowager feels that Chinchilla's words are not good, Chinchilla, as an outsider, will not covet the imperial family's matters. Chinchilla will take her leave." After saying that, Chinchilla stood up, saluted, and left. She also took Gong Mama, Ji Yun, and Bing Tang with her on the way out. The Empress Dowager's trembling index finger pointed fiercely in the direction where Qin Yining left. Her whole body was trembling. Look at her. Her man defied the imperial edict, and she dares to be rude to Aijia. Their family must have the intention to rebel. The Empress anxiously said, "The imperial harem cannot interfere in politics. Empress Dowager, please be careful with your words. Your Majesty knows whether or not to rebel." The Empress Dowager suddenly stared at the Empress. When Li Helan heard that Pang Shao defied the imperial edict, she was afraid that the Empress Dowager would go to Li Qiqian and say something bad about Pang Shao, so she hurriedly said, "All right, Mother, it's all in the past. Imperial brother will naturally make a decision on the matters of the imperial court. However, Lon Her feels that today's matter should be settled with imperial sister-in-law apologizing to concubine Yun. Dirty linen should not be aired in public. If this matter is blown up and people see us as a joke, will the imperial family's face still be left?" Concubine Yun also said, reporting to the Empress Dowager, "Chinchilla is also willing to let bygones be bygones. Chinchilla's grievances are nothing. Chinchilla only hopes that the family can live in harmony." The Empress could see that concubine Yun deliberately said this in front of the Empress Dowager to provoke her. Just now, Qin Yining took the risk to turn the tables in front of the Empress Dowager. She must protect this situation and not cause any more trouble. Although she was the Empress, she did not have the ability to adapt. She also did not have the wisdom to quarrel with others. She could not let the Empress Dowager have something to use against her. Thinking of this, the Empress said, Qinxia also does not want this matter to be blown up, but we cannot suffer losses. Qinxia is your Majesty's wife and did not wrongly accuse concubine Yun at all. If Qinxia apologizes, wouldn't your Majesty's dignity be gone? If the Empress Dowager forces Qinxia to apologize, Qinxia will have to prove her innocence, for the imperial family's face, and for how to not be talked about behind his back in the future. Qinxia can only go and beat the drum. You. It seems that you really want to make life difficult for Aijia. Qinxia does not dare. If the road is not smooth, then I will cry out. Good, good. Get out for Aijia. The Empress curtsied and walked out slowly. The Empress Dowager sat stiffly in her original position, panting heavily. When Imperial Concubine Yi saw how angry the Empress Dowager was, she pursed her lips and forced a smile. Aunt, look at how savage she is. Don't take it to heart. In the future, we'll deal with her. Aunt, scram. The Empress Dowager grabbed the plate of melon seeds and threw it at Concubine Yun. Concubine Yun was so scared that she screamed, took 2 steps back, and fell to the ground. She covered her mouth and began to cry. Li Helan secretly scolded her for being an idiot. She turned to comfort the Empress Dowager. Imperial Mother, don't be sad and don't be angry. We will have plenty of opportunities in the future. However, today's matter was ruined by Qin Yining. If she didn't suddenly appear and force logic, wouldn't Imperial sister-in-law have to kneel and beg you? It was Aijia who underestimated her. In the end, she is a woman who can make Pang Zhishi dizzy. How could she not have some tricks up her sleeve? These words pierced Li Helan's heart. When she thought of Pang Xiao, she still felt depressed. Isn't she just lucky? She was born with a foxy face. That's enough. When it comes to luck, you are luckier than anyone else. You even transformed from a village girl to a princess. I don't see you capturing your husband's heart. You have to listen to Aijia's advice. That child Jilan is a bit wooden and cold. However, if a man doesn't have a bit of personality, how can he be called a man? Although he doesn't say it, he is loyal and devoted. This time, he beat the Taiden into submission. Isn't it Jilan's contribution? Your imperial brother chose such a son-in-law for you. Do you feel wronged? You should put away your feelings as soon as possible and get along well with him. Look at why the Qin clan is so powerful. They can give birth to twins, but you don't lay eggs. Not only don't you lay eggs for the Ji clan, you even raise. Looking at the sobbing concubine Yun, the Empress Dowager didn't directly mention the matter of raising a gigolo. It could be considered as giving Li Helan some face. She only fiercely glared at her. Alright, you two are useless things. Get out of Aijia's sight. Neither of you are useful at the crucial moment. What use do Aijia have for you? Li Helan pursed her lips. It's as if anyone wants to come. You say I'm useless. Didn't you also lose to them? Without waiting for the Empress Dowager to angrily rebuke her, Li Helan hastily stood up and strode away. Only the Empress Dowager was left to vent her anger on concubine Yun, who still didn't dare to leave. At this time, the Empress was walking side by side with Qin Yining on the way back to Cunning Palace. The Empress seemed to have fought a war. Her entire body was weak and she relied on Sun Momo to support her. Thank you for just now. If it wasn't for you, today I'm afraid. Chapter 774. When the Empress heard this, she shook her head helplessly. How could she not know her own worth? In short, today's matter is all thanks to you. Don't worry, I will plan this matter well and explain it to your Majesty later. I won't let your Majesty misunderstand Wang Yi. Thank you, Empress, for your understanding. Qin Yining smiled and bowed. The Empress smiled and shook her head. When she thought of the Empress Dowager's face today, she couldn't help but cry again. When Qin Yining saw the Empress like this, she felt both pity and helplessness. It seemed that it wasn't easy for the Empress to sit firmly in the first position in the harem. Today's observation showed that the Empress was a person who stood aloof from worldly affairs. She wasn't good at using her brain and was too lazy to compete with others. Unexpectedly, Li Qitian had already been in power for 6 years, but the Empress still hadn't adapted to life in the harem. Qin Yining returned to Cunning Palace and sat with the Empress for a while before leaving the palace and returning home. Her daily routine was very fixed. She would come to the palace regularly to learn the rules and then return home. She would have dinner with her family, deal with the matters at hand, and go to the palace the next day. Master Zhong had also returned to the capital a few days ago and was dealing with business matters. When encountering difficult matters, the two of them couldn't meet to discuss and could only send letters or have someone pass on a message. Such a busy life repeated itself. In the blink of an eye, the procession of Taiden Princess Tana arrived outside the city. Qin Yining finally let out a sigh of relief. Her days of learning the rules in the palace were finally over. Honglu Temple had already prepared the rules for the arrival of the Taiden Princess. The grand ceremony this time wasn't to welcome Princess Tana, but to show Dezhou's etiquette and spirit in front of the Taiden people. Therefore, all the ceremonies followed the ancient etiquette in order to show Dezhou's deep heritage. Including Qin Yining, the wedding envoy, from Qin Yining's understanding, it was all to humiliate the Taiden people. The winner was king, and the loser was a bandit. Taiden had kowtowed to Jiziyu for many years, but in the end, he was defeated. Now that Dezhou had such an opportunity to hold his head high, how could he not make full use of it? Qin Yining didn't have any objections to this. After all, she didn't have a good impression of Taiden. But Qin Huaiyuan thought more than she did. Sister Yi, tomorrow is the official day. You must be very careful. You must not let your Majesty find fault with you, but you must not overdo it either. The Taiden blamed you for the death of a Nari Khan. This Princess Tana was sent here for the political marriage. She also came with the hatred of the country. Be careful if she talks bad about you in front of your Majesty. Qin Yining nodded slowly. He remembered Li Qitian's way of doing things and said, I understand. Father, don't worry. I will act appropriately. No one knew how beautiful Princess Tana was, but once she was favored, she could say a few words in front of Li Qitian. That would be enough to make it difficult for the subordinates. If Li Qitian was dissatisfied with her, wouldn't there be a lot of reasons to target her? Qin Yining had always been very careful. Targeting her was like targeting Pang Xiao. With Pang Xiao's current situation, he couldn't let any more problems arise. Father, is there any news from the old capital? I wrote to Wang Yi, but he always reports good news and not bad news. My men haven't sent back any news yet. Qin Yining was a little annoyed. Qin Huaiyuan smiled understandingly. Ji is afraid that you will be worried. I do have some new news from the old capital. Qin Yining's face heated up after hearing Qin Huaiyuan's gentle teasing. She coughed and nodded. Father, please tell me. Qin Huaiyuan said, actually, your Majesty was the one who planned all of this and predicted it. Ever since Yuqi Shujie was conferred the title of king, he has been resentful of Dezhou for breaking his promise. Naturally, he won't be friendly to Ji. Qin Yining nodded and frowned worriedly. I also guessed that. And as far as I know, Yuchi Shujia and the Yuchi Yen are very close now. They plan to join forces. Yes. Furthermore, there were already rumors spreading out in the old capital. Many people were proclaiming how good Southern Yen was, how prosperous the lives of the people were, how harsh the Great Zhou was, how poor the lives of the people were, and how corrupt the government was. That's all. Qin Yining narrowed his eyes and thought for a while. Then, he shook his head and said, You can't blame the people of Southern Yen for fighting back. If I was played like that and fed a careless pie, I would also be angry. That's right. It's just that these people's rumors have caused the situation in the old capital to become unstable again. The new magistrate is also a stingy miser. It's true that Jishi controls the army, but the problem of food and salary can't be solved by the government. She can only think of other ways. If she doesn't get paid for a long time, I'm afraid she won't be able to control the army well. Qin Yining sighed softly. He told Qin Huayuan about what he saw and heard in Jianchuan City in a low voice. He also told Qin Huayuan about the relationship between the reclusive and prominent families. That Chiu family has experienced an unforeseen event. They will definitely choose another person to assist them. Chiu Yuanqing won't choose Jishi, so he can only choose someone else. Who else in the world can be compared to Jishi and be able to resist Emperor Zhou? Therefore, I'm guessing that they will choose between Jilan and the Yuchi Yen. Qin Huayuan relaxed and leaned back in his chair. His expression was very calm, as if what Qin Yining told him was not surprising. His index finger lightly tapped the edge of the table. After thinking for a while, he said, I think that Chiu Yuanqing will probably choose Jinan Wang. Qin Yining also had some guesses in her heart. However, her thoughts were the same as Qin Huayuan's. She couldn't help but laugh. Father, why do you think it will be him? After all, Jilan is much more outstanding and powerful than him. Now, her military achievements are splendid and her ability is outstanding. It's even more admirable. Qin Huayuan smiled and said, Haven't you already thought it through in your heart? Jilan's a little bit is actually his weakness. He is too strong and too powerful. For a person with narrow vision and limited ability, choosing Jilan or Jishi is very likely to backfire. Jinan Wang, on the other hand, is much easier to control. Jinan Wang has a soft heart and is not good at scheming. He also has no talent in court affairs. The only person he can use is Gu Shixiang. However, Gu Shixiang is old. How long can he help Jinan Wang? Therefore, in my opinion, the Chiu family should choose Jinan Wang, who is easier to control. Qin Yining smiled and asked, Father, why do you think that Chiu Yuanqing is a person with narrow vision and limited ability? Do you still need to ask? He killed his own father to seize power and was discovered by others. This led to the division of such a large family. His own power was reduced by half. He even gave the banner of justice to Chiu Feishan. Regardless of his character, just look at his actions. Don't tell me that his vision is narrow and his ability is limited. Qin Yining was amused and laughed. Father, you value such intelligence. You also see the problem clearly. Oh if you already knew, why did you still ask me? Qin Huayuan smiled. Daughter just wants to see if we have the same thoughts. Qin Huayuan couldn't help but smile even more happily. You are my daughter. Of course, we have the same thoughts. Speaking of this, Qin Huayuan said seriously, tomorrow, you only need to act according to the plan of the Honglu Temple. You don't need to stand out. You only need to act conservatively. Anyway, you are just a weak woman. As long as you don't make a big mistake, no one can blame you. Yes, Daughter knows. Qin Yining stood up and solemnly saluted. The next morning, the Taiten wedding procession, which had been stationed outside the city for the night, finally entered the capital under the grand welcome of the Honglu Temple. Qin Yining put on makeup according to the standard, and her face was absolutely stunning. She stood at the head of the wedding procession in a phoenix coronet and robe. On both sides of the yellow road, behind the human wall formed by the Jingji guards, there were people who were excitedly craning their necks to look in her direction. Qin Yining pretended that nothing had happened and waited patiently with a calm expression. Not long after, the eunuch in charge of coordinating with Qin Yining's wedding procession trotted back from afar. He whispered to Qin Yining, "The procession is almost here." Qin Yining nodded and gently raised his hand behind him. In an instant, the ceremonial music was played. Qin Yining and the Honglu Temple official walked forward, one on the left and one on the right. In the cold wind, Qin Yining's embroidered cloak spread out like a fan, and the fluttering flags on the side of the road rustled in the wind. Not long after, Qin Yining saw a group of carriages, led by the eunuch and watched by the people on the side of the road, arrive in a grandiose manner. The doors of the leading carriage were wide open. The Taiten princess, Tana, was wearing a red robe with narrow sleeves. There was a golden belt around her waist, and a hat with colorful feathers on her head. The tassels that hung down fell on her forehead, and two glossy black braids made her look exceptionally healthy. Qin Yining had already seen Princess Tana clearly when she walked closer. She was a tall and voluptuous beauty with a slightly exotic bloodline. She had a high nose bridge and deep gray eyes. This kind of woman was not common in Dezhou. Qin Yining had already begun to guess Li Qitian's attitude towards this type of woman. Qin Yining thought a lot in her heart, but didn't show it on her face. She followed the etiquette and greeted the Honglu Temple official, one on the left and one on the right. Then, she followed the ancient etiquette and read out the marriage invitation document. This document was drafted by the Imperial Hanlin Academy. It expressed the welcome and proclaimed Dezhou's hope for peace. At the same time, it reprimanded the Taiten barbarians for their evil deeds. Every word pierced the hearts of the Taiten people, and no one could find fault with it. As Qin Yining listened, she felt a little embarrassed for the Taiten people. However, the winner was the king, and the loser was the bandit. Since the Taiten had lost the war, they could only bear the consequences. By the time all the ceremonies were completed, Princess Tana's exotic and beautiful face was filled with anger. Her cheeks were as red as the red robe on her body. Qin Yining smiled and said, "Princess Tana, please follow me into the palace." Princess Tana was standing in the same place and being poked in the heart by the people from the Honglu Temple. She was so embarrassed that she wanted to quickly escape, but she also had to maintain her status as a princess. It was very difficult. Now that she heard Qin Yining's words, she felt a little relieved. She felt an inexplicable sense of crisis when she looked at Qin Yining's graceful demeanor, which was like the reflection of the moonlight. She spoke in a not very standard Dezhou dialect. "You are the emperor's concubine. P.S." Chapter 775. Qin Yining raised her eyebrows. It seemed that the princess had regarded her as an imaginary enemy as soon as she met her. Li Qitian's concubine. She felt disgusted just thinking about it. Qin Yining straightened her back and smiled. "I am Prince Zhongshuan's concubine from the Qin clan." Prince Zhongshuan's concubine. Princess Tana's eyes suddenly became fierce. She gritted her teeth and said, "It's you. It's you who killed Nari Khan." Princess Tana's eyes were like knives, as if she was going to be swallowed. Qin Yining had expected this scene. She sighed with emotion at Li Qitian's good calculation, but she said with 30% politeness and 70% strength, "Princess Tana, you'd better not slander others. This is the land of Dezhou, not Taiten. If you want to act as unscrupulously as before, I'm afraid you can't. Slander. What a sharp tongue. Princess Tana's face was livid. She was already full of grievances just now, and now she was going to be treated like this by Qin Yining. Tears welled up in her eyes. But she still had to consider her identity as a princess. She lowered her voice with tears and anger. You know what you've done. I won't let you go. I swear, I will tear you into pieces. Qin Yining chuckled and shook her head. She said in a dignified manner, Princess Tana, you'd better investigate carefully before making a conclusion. Don't be used as a knife. After saying this meaningfully, Qin Yining said, it's the auspicious time. Princess Tana, please get in the car. Qin Yining's attitude was actually very kind. At least she was not stupid enough to show any fear and vigilance against Princess Tana in front of so many onlookers. But she was too beautiful. She walked around in front of Princess Tana, who was proud of her beauty, which made Princess Tana afraid. What's more, she was the real murderer of a Nari Khan. With this conclusion, even if Qin Yining smiled, it was a sneer in Tana's eyes. Even if it was a kind reminder, Tana had an ulterior motive. She even felt that Qin Yining was despising her. She looked at her as if she was looking at an ant trying to bite an elephant. It seemed that Qin Yining could crush her to death with a slight movement of her fingers. How dare she despise her? Princess Tana took a deep breath and returned to the carriage with her identity. As soon as she sat down and was sure that the people outside couldn't see her, she couldn't help shedding tears. When the two maids in the carriage saw the princess was crying, they couldn't help crying. Was it? Reluctantly went all the way to enter the palace gate. At this point, the bridal escort team and the bridal escort team finished the handover. The minister of Honglu Temple took the Taiden escort general to the guest house for a temporary rest. Qin Yining, the bridal escort ambassador, sent Princess Tana to Chushu Palace and completed his task. As for the arrangements after that, it was up to Li Qitian. Qin Yining had practiced many times in advance, so the journey was very smooth and there were no mistakes. When they arrived at Chushu Palace, Qin Yining asked the palace maids and mamas who had been waiting there to greet Princess Tana. Qin Yining smiled and said, Princess Tana, please settle down. The palace maids here are all here to serve you. If you have any requirements, just tell them. After saluting, Qin Yining left Chushu Palace and went to report to the Empress. Princess Tana looked at Qin Yining's back and secretly clenched her fists. Her enemy was in front of her, but he still dared to stretch his weak neck in front of her. She really wanted to bite him like a wolf on the grassland. But he had to take into account his identity and status, so he couldn't do anything. Compared with the helplessness when she was chosen for the marriage alliance, this kind of helplessness was even more unbearable. In Cunning Palace, the Empress had been waiting for Qin Yining for a long time. As soon as she saw Qin Yining being led in by the chamberlain, she asked with a little eagerness, how was it? Seeing the Empress like this, Qin Yining sighed in his heart. Of course, he knew that the Empress didn't just want to know whether the bridal escort went smoothly. What the Empress wanted to know was what kind of person Princess Tana was. Qin Yining saluted first, then approached the Empress and said, Princess Tana's appearance is outstanding, and her temperament is straightforward. Just these two sentences contain too much meaning. The Empress blinked, and her eyes dimmed. Although the newcomer was a little arrogant, she was young, beautiful, and of noble birth, so she would at least be a noble consort. But the Empress was already yesterday's flower, and she didn't have the ability to compete with these young and beautiful women. Seeing the Empress's weak and disappointed expression, Qin Yining secretly shook his head. Nyang Nyang and His Highness the eldest prince, there will be plenty of time in the future. No matter what, you are the only legitimate wife. These words were very straightforward. With Qin Yining's identity, he shouldn't have said these words to the Empress so directly. The Empress also understood this. Seeing Qin Yining so sincerely helping her, she nodded with emotion and said with a smile, I understand your good intentions. I will think about it carefully in the future. During these days, with you accompanying me in the palace, my heart is a lot brighter. In the future, if you have time, you can send a token to the palace at any time, and we can talk. Qin Yining smiled and nodded, but in his heart, he knew that he wouldn't come if he didn't have to. She didn't know when Li Qitian would go crazy and attack Pang Xiao, so how could she take the initiative to come? Fortunately, the wedding had come to an end, so she could go back and live a peaceful life. This subject wife is extremely grateful for Nyang Nyang's good intentions. This subject wife will take her leave. The Empress smiled and nodded, saying, this one will help you inform the Empress Dowager. Yes, many thanks Nyang Nyang. Qin Yining was thorough in his etiquette, then left the palace with Ji Yun and Bing Tang. The Empress hugged the eldest prince and coaxed him for a while. Looking at the sky outside, she said, this one will go pay respects to the Empress Dowager. Yes. The palace attendants immediately prepared the shoulders. The Empress actually had some thoughts. The Empress Dowager has always wanted to support Imperial Concubine Yun, and Imperial Concubine Yun is indeed favored. She has run rampant in the palace for so long, and most of the other concubines and concubines cannot compare to her in terms of appearance and family background. They may have been thrown to the side after serving your majesty in bed once. Now that a princess has come to marry for peace, for the sake of the country, your majesty will definitely come and dote on her for a period of time. The Empress has been bullied by the Empress Dowager for so long, she really wanted to see the Empress Dowager's face. Let's not talk about how the Empress will go pay respects to the Empress Dowager. Qin Yining left the palace and rode the carriage back to the Wangfu. The winter weather was cold, and it looked like it was going to be a new year. The snow in the capital had accumulated a foot thick overnight. Qin Yining's carriage was able to travel smoothly on the roads that had been cleaned. If it was not cleaned, it would be more difficult to travel, and the journey back to the Fu would be seriously delayed. At this time, Jing Zhe, who was in charge of driving the carriage, suddenly pulled the reins and softly said, Wang Fei. Qin Yining heard Jing Zhe's voice and felt that something was wrong. If they were in danger, Jing Zhe would not change places with her, but now he seemed to be shocked. She lifted the curtain of the carriage and looked outside. She saw a tall figure wearing a dark gray cotton cloak and holding a figure wearing a dark gray cloak slowly approaching. Qin Yining narrowed her eyes, thinking that she might have seen wrongly. Wasn't that Mu Jinghu and Qiu Feishan? Qin Yining quickly knocked on the back door. Xiao Shui, who was outside, helped to open the door. Qiu Feishan didn't care much and jumped off the carriage. She walked around the carriage and directly walked in the calf-deep snow. Ji Yun and Bing Tang hurriedly followed. Xiao Shui and the others also left the carriage to protect Qin Yining. Mu Gongzi. Lady Qiu. Standing 3 steps away from the two, Qin Yining looked at Qiu Feishan's appearance in surprise. This was the first time she saw Qiu Feishan dressed as a woman. He was originally handsome and charming, but when he changed into women's clothing, he became incomparably charming. Most importantly, Qiu Feishan's long hair was tied up and combed into a simple bun at the back of her head. Her hand was also held by Mu Jinghu's large hand. Seeing Qin Yining looking at them, Mu Jinghu's face was already red, but he refused to let go of Qiu Feishan's hand. Qiu Feishan was much more indifferent than Mu Jinghu. She smiled at Qin Yining and said, Prince Zhongshuan, long time no see. I have booked a private room at the tea house. Would Princess Consort do me the honor of having a cup of tea? Qin Yining was afraid of Tian Jizi, but she trusted Mu Jinghu's character. Therefore, she didn't doubt or refuse at this time. She nodded happily and said, okay. Long time no see, I also want to talk to the two of you. Mu Jinghu quietly breathed a sigh of relief. He was afraid that Pang Xiao would misunderstand him and betray him. Now that Qin Yining trusted him and was still friendly, he was quietly relieved. Qin Yining's attitude could represent Pang Xiao's attitude. It seemed that his good friends were not in vain. Qiu Feishan saw Mu Jinghu's expression and shook her head in amusement. She gently patted his hand and said, "Don't just stand there, let's get on the carriage first." Oh, right. Mu Jinghu smiled at Qin Yining and held Qiu Feishan's hand to walk to a blue carriage parked at the side. Qiu Feishan didn't wait for herself to get on the carriage and was easily carried by Mu Jinghu. He gently and carefully placed on the carriage. Qiu Feishan smiled helplessly and said, "I can get on the carriage myself." "No, you are pregnant now. Don't be careless. You have to be more careful." Qiu Feishan's smile became more helpless. Qin Yining was tongue-tied when he heard this. These two people were together. Qiu Feishan seemed to have noticed Qin Yining's surprise and smiled calmly. Qin Yining also temporarily put away his surprise and got on the carriage first. He ordered Jing Zhi to follow the carriage in front and came to a small tea house. When they went up to the second floor, they found that it was very quiet. It seemed that Qiu Feishan had booked the entire second floor for convenience. When they walked to the innermost private room, Qiu Feishan's servant girl, Being, quickly came up to greet them. "Mistress didn't bring this servant along when you went out." "It's fine now, but if the baby is affected, is that a joke?" Qiu Feishan smiled and said, "Isn't it fine now? Why haven't you greeted Prince Zhongshuan?" Being only then noticed Qin Yining. She blushed and came forward to curtsy. "This servant greets Princess." Chapter 776. Being did not wait for the waiter to step forward and personally went downstairs to bring up the tea tray. There was a white porcelain teapot and teacups on the tea tray, as well as a sky-blue cup with warm honey water inside. Qiu Feishan smiled and took the cup that Being brought over. Then, she folded her sleeves and brought the tea to Qin Yining's hand. Qin Yining took the tea and thanked her with a smile. Then, he went straight to the point and asked, "You two are married?" Mu Jinghu's face immediately turned red when he heard this. He nodded and said, "Yes, we are married." Qin Yining said with a face full of smiles, "Congratulations, I did not know before and did not prepare a proper congratulatory gift. I will make it up to you immediately when we go back." "Thank you." Qiu Feishan smiled gently. Mu Jinghu's face turned even redder. Qin Yining asked with a smile, "No wonder you disappeared when you saved Miss Qiu. So you kidnapped her?" Mu Jinghu nodded, then shook his head and explained, "I am not a person who does not keep his promises. Many years ago, my martial uncle had said that my future wife would be different from the rest, a woman with peerless beauty. When he drove me to the south, he said that my marriage was coming soon. I have asked him before, but he said that it was a secret that could not be revealed. I asked him who my future wife was, but he only said that he wanted me to come out for a stroll and bring back whoever I liked. Then, he would help me take a look." Qin Yining clicked his tongue and could not help but shake his head in amusement. This was in line with Tian Jizi's usual style of doing things. "So you took Miss Qiu away because you found her pleasing to the eye?" Mu Jinghu's face was so red that it could drip blood. He lowered his head and nodded. Qin Yining looked at Qiu Feishan, who was smiling calmly, and then looked at Mu Jinghu, who was even more stupefied now that he had a wife. He couldn't help but shake his head and say with a smile, "I have some things to discuss with Mrs. Mu. Young Master Mu, would you like to leave us for a moment?" Mu Jinghu was elated to hear her address him as Mrs. Mu. He nodded and said, "All right, you guys continue chatting. I'll go out first." Mu Jinghu turned to look at Qiu Feishan. Seeing Qiu Feishan smiling and nodding at him, he reluctantly touched Qiu Feishan's hand before turning to leave. Qin Yining also dismissed Bing Tang and Ji Yun. At the same time, Qiu Feishan also dismissed her maidservant. Only Qiu Feishan and Qin Yining were left in the room. Qin Yining said, "The place you chose must be safe, so I'll be frank with you." Qiu Feishan smiled and said, "Please speak." Qin Yining nodded and said, "You shouldn't be willing, right?" Although he didn't say it in detail, Qiu Feishan understood what Qin Yining meant. She smiled bitterly and said, "I have no other choice. Tian Jizi locked me up, and I had no chance to escape. She came to talk to me every day, analyzing the situation in the imperial court and the current situation. She also told me that my grandfather was killed by that traitor, Qiu Yuanqing. The Qiu family was torn apart, and I couldn't bear to see the efforts of my grandfather and my predecessors go down the drain. I want to revitalize the Qiu family and avenge my grandfather, so I can't be locked up all the time. That Tian Jizi is like a monster. She can tell what I'm thinking just by looking at me. She then negotiated with me." Qin Yining continued, "Is it true that if she marries you to Mr. Mu, she will set you free and help you to make plans to avenge your grandfather? She will also help you to take back the Qiu family. It seems that you know a lot about Tian Jizi." Qiu Feishan smiled bitterly, but there was a hint of sweetness in her smile. "Although it's not exactly what you said, it's not far off. At first, I was forced to marry him for the sake of freedom. But later, I found out that he was actually a very honest and stubborn person. I originally thought that if my grandfather took me back, I would have to spend the rest of my life in front of a Buddhist lamp. All my efforts would go down the drain. But now I have my own family, and I can do more things with my husband's company. This is really an unexpected gain." Qin Yining smiled and said, "I can see that although you have no choice but to accept this marriage, you also feel happy now. Young Master Mu is an honest person. He is serious and has a one-track mind. As long as you are sincere to him, he will repay you 100 times, 1,000 times more. I think that it's not necessarily a bad thing for you two to be together. At least you can pick up the Qiu family's banner again, and fight with Qiu Yuanqing openly." Qiu Feishan smiled, "You always see things so clearly. You're right. It's not just me. I believe that any woman who is forced to marry someone wouldn't be happy in their heart. The feeling of being forced to marry, and the feeling of being forced into a blind marriage are two different things. You have a deep relationship with Prince Zhongshuan, so naturally you won't understand this kind of fear and anger. Moreover, I was already at my wit's end at that time, and was even forced to marry by her. But as you said, I'm already satisfied with the marriage. He has his merits, and I'm a person who likes to use my brain. I like to make decisions for everything. If he had the same personality as me, we wouldn't be together. Now that he supports me, indulges me, and even protects me, I'm really satisfied." Hearing Qiu Feishan's words, Qin Yining could finally rest assured. Although Mu Jinghu was Tian Jizi's disciple, she had some understanding of this person's personality. He was not a person with bad intentions, and was even more honest and upright than ordinary people, and more loyal. Chapter 777. Qiu Feishan actually told her whereabouts, which made Qin Yining feel surprised. But after thinking about it, she could also understand Qiu Feishan's meaning. Qiu Feishan and Qiu Yuanqing broke off. Qiu Yuanqing would definitely not choose Pang Xiao to support, so he would stand on the opposite side of Qiu Feishan, who chose Pang Xiao. Since Qiu Feishan made it clear that she would support Pang Xiao in front of the Qiu family, then she would definitely not change her mind. The conflict between Qiu Feishan and the Qiu family was irreconcilable. Although her Sidong account had outstanding economic strength, in the end, it lacked hard power. Pang Xiao was just the opposite of her. He had an army in his hand, but he had to find money to support them. They could just complement each other and mutually benefit each other. Therefore, Qiu Feishan would definitely continue to support Pang Xiao. She told her whereabouts to tell her that they were indeed standing in the same boat. Qin Yining thought about this point clearly, so she didn't have any worries. She smiled and said, I made some clothes, shoes, and socks for Wang Yi. If it's convenient, please help me to send them. Qiu Feishan smiled and nodded. Naturally, it's convenient. Then her eyes became thoughtful. She lowered her voice and asked, should all women do needlework for their husbands? Qin Yining was stunned by Qiu Feishan's question. Before she could answer, Qiu Feishan blushed and said, I didn't have parents since I was a child. I grew up with my grandfather. I don't know much about this. My grandfather raised me like a grandson. I don't know how to do needlework. Do you think I should learn how to tailor clothes? Qin Yining said, it's not necessary, it's just a way to express your feelings. What I do is different. I have nothing to do in my spare time, so I just do it to pass the time. Moreover, my needlework is not good, I can't embroider flowers, I can only carelessly sew. But you are so smart, as long as you have the heart to learn, you will learn very quickly. Qiu Feishan nodded seriously. What you said makes sense. Whether it's good or bad, it's my intention. He's not the kind of person who would dislike food. I see that he's very frugal on a daily basis. When he eats, he won't even drop a single grain of rice. Qin Yining recalled how Pang Xiao had described Mu Jinghu in private. He laughed and said, young Master Mu is indeed simple. Qiu Feishan giggled when she heard Qin Yining's description. After a while, Mu Jinghu returned. Seeing that they were chatting happily, he quietly let out a sigh of relief. Mu Jinghu smiled and said, it's getting late. I'm afraid the sky will turn dark soon. Let's talk to the princess consort again next time. Hearing Mu Jinghu coaxing her like this, Qiu Feishan laughed and said, I'll listen to you. I was just saying that we are going to the old capital this time. The princess consort said that she has something to give to Wang Yi. Mu Jinghu's smile widened. Sure, I'll go get it later. It's nothing, I still want to go and get it. Mu Jinghu's face stiffened and said, no, you're already tired today. You have to take care of your body. Anyway, running errands to get something is easier for me than flicking my fingers. Seeing Mu Jinghu's insistence, Qiu Feishan could only compromise. Alright, then you go get it. Qin Yining looked at the two from the side and couldn't help but reveal a sincere smile. She was happy for the two of them, but also because she remembered how Pang Xiao treated her so gently when Pang Xiao was by her side. Qin Yining returned to the residence and asked Bing Tang and Ji Yun to help him pack up the things that he was going to bring to Pang Xiao. He also prepared some expensive medicinal herbs and ingredients and arranged them into a basket, intending to give it to Qiu Feishan. After dinner, Qin Yining was chatting with Qin Huayuan in the reception pavilion when Ji Yun came to Qin Yining's side and whispered, young Master Mu came by just now, he already took the things away. Qin Yining nodded. I know, he also brought the things for Lady Qiu. Yes, he did. Young Master Mu looked very happy, he even asked the servant to thank you on his behalf. Qin Yining smiled and said, he must have hurried back to accompany his wife. Ji Yun also smiled. That's right. Qin Huayuan listened for a moment and knew who Qin Yining was talking about. He asked with some surprise, Lady Qiu and young Master Mu are married? Yes, they seem to be in a good relationship now. Qin Yining told Qin Huayuan about them. Qin Huayuan smiled and sighed with emotion. This is really a marriage of 1,000 miles. Young Master Mu and Lady Qiu, Two completely different people actually decided to get together in such a way. It's inconceivable to say it out loud. Who says it isn't? Although Tian Jizi's method of forcing people is a bit disgusting, seeing them living well now, I feel comfortable in my heart. Qin Huayuan smiled and said, "It's the same for you and Jishi. Speaking of which, it's even more inconceivable that you two can get together." Qin Yining was stunned. Thinking of the past and the national enmity between them, he couldn't help but smile again. That night, Qin Yining dreamed of Pang Xiao. On a cold winter day, Qin Yining dreamed of Pang Xiao sneaking into the old capital and finding a farmhouse to cook a bowl of cold noodles with beef soup for her. Pang Xiao's culinary skills were top-notch. In the future, if they didn't want to be Wang Yi, they could still find a small place to open a restaurant to support themselves. At that time, their life would definitely be much more enjoyable than it was now. Thinking of this, Qin Yining was smiling even in his dream. The next day, she woke up naturally. Because she didn't need to go to the palace to learn the rules, she just casually wore a set of casual clothes and went to Chunhui Hall to complete the etiquette for Yao Qinggu and the Yao clan. Then, she went to old Madame's place. It was rare for the whole family to have a chance to gather together, and it was almost the new year. The womenfolk were busy preparing for the new year and preparing clothes for spring. The whole family seemed to be in full swing. After Princess Tana entered the capital, Qin Huayuan and Honglu Temple also became busy. After Princess Tana was conferred the title of Consort Shun, it was said that Li Qitian doted on her because of her naive personality and her appearance, which was completely different from the women of Dezhou. At the same time, General Su, who had come to escort the bride, also received the proper reception. After the first month, Natsu bid farewell to Li Qitian. Before he left, he even asked for an imperial decree to bid farewell to concubine Shun. Because concubine Shun had married into the imperial family, she could not return to the Taitan for the rest of her life. Li Qitian doted on Princess Tana, so he naturally nodded in agreement. That day, Su was led by the official to see Princess Tana. Princess Tana was still dressed as a Taitan woman. What was different from before was that she was like a cat that had put away her claws. Now, there was an indescribable softness on her body. Princess Tana dismissed everyone and arranged for someone to guard outside. Natsu smiled and said in Taitan, "It seems that Her Highness the Princess is doing well here. Are you very satisfied with this emperor?" Natsu was Si Qin's trusted aide. Although Princess Tana was dissatisfied with his frivolous and straightforward words, she couldn't offend him. Chapter 778. Plot 2. In the end, she was a princess of noble birth. In Taitan, the status of noblewomen was not low. Princess Tana lived like a fish in water. When had she ever suffered any grievances? But ever since she came to Dezhou, she had been enduring. Not only did she have to learn the rules of Xianzhou, but she also had to change her eating habits. Not only that, she had to pay respects to the Empress Dowager and the Empress every day. The Empress Dowager was fine. After all, she was the mother of the Emperor of Dezhou. But the Empress was old and ugly. Why should she be under that ugly woman? There was also the vixen-like concubine Yi. She relied on her status as the Empress Dowager's niece to do whatever she wanted in the harem. The lower-ranked concubines were often bullied like dogs in front of her. Even the Taitan princess was inferior in the eyes of these people. She was a tool sent by the barbarians to curry favor with Dezhou. Tana was a person who could not stand being angered. But she could not forget why she was sent here. For the peace of the two countries, she could not do anything inappropriate and give Dezhou an excuse to attack the Taitan. Although Naraisu was Si Qin's trusted aide, in the end, they were both totters. She usually controlled her emotions, but in front of Naraisu, she faintly lost control. If not for the fact that she was a princess and should not cry in front of a subordinate, she would have cried long ago. Princess Tana's eyes were red, and her long eyelashes were wet. Her healthy honey-colored cheeks were also red from holding her breath, showing a bit of weakness that was rarely seen by others. Naraisu looked away helplessly when she saw Princess Tana's appearance. No matter how Princess Tana was doing, it was not something a subordinate like him could interfere with. Princess Tana held back her tears. She did not lose her status as a princess. She raised her chin proudly. Speak. Why are you looking for me? You can't just be saying goodbye to me, right? Naraisu smiled. It seems that Princess Tana can adapt to the role of concubine Shun. Of course I have to get used to it. Since this consort is already married, this consort will have to start a new life. I can't always be tied down by the past. It's great that Your Highness thinks this way. It saves me the trouble of saying anything. The princess was not only de Zhou's consort Shun, but also the Taiden's princess. In the future, when she lived in de Zhou, she had to remember her own status. She had to know what she should do and what she should not do. You have to know where you come from, and you have to know that even if you get married, you have to have the support of your family. I don't need you to teach me that. Do you think I'll allow you to tell me what to do? Yes, since that's the case, I won't say anything more. Is it convenient for us to talk here? Chapter 779. Naraisu was surprised that Princess Tana would say this. But on second thought, she was forced to come here for a political marriage, so it was inevitable that she would have some ideas. Anyway, with Princess Tana's personality and ability, it would be difficult for her to get involved in Taiden affairs while she was in de Zhou. Your Highness, you think too much. Naraisu smiled calmly. It was the Khan's idea to tell you this. Even if you are married, you are still a Taiden princess. Besides, the Khan didn't say that you have to help. You can't help much in the palace. Princess Tana's breath stopped, and she looked away in embarrassment. In the past, she could be a free eagle, but now she could only be locked in a golden cage. No one cared how high she could fly, they only cared about how her fur looked. Naraisu saw that Princess Tana's expression changed again after hearing her words, and she couldn't help but chuckle and shake her head. This princess couldn't be said to be stupid, but she wasn't a meticulous and intelligent person. She was too straightforward, like most Taiden women, but she might not be able to get along well in the harem of de Zhou. Tell me, how does the Khan plan to deal with Prince Zhongshuan? Is there anything I can do? This. Naraisu smiled, but she looked hesitant. Princess Tana didn't urge her, and she only looked at Naraisu questioningly. Naraisu said helplessly, actually, I don't know exactly what the Khan wants to do. It's just a man's business. Your Highness is in the palace, and the only thing you can do is to make Pang Zhishi more anxious. What do you mean? Princess Tana raised her eyebrows. I don't know if you have heard, but when the Qin clan was besieged and chased by us Taiden, Prince Zhongshuan went to look for them against the imperial order. Although these two people's characters aren't good, it's true that they have deep feelings for each other. Princess, why don't you talk to the Emperor of de Zhou and find an excuse to keep the Qin clan by your side? In this way, you can take revenge for Inari Khan and cause trouble for Pang Zhishi. It's even possible that Pang Zhishi and the Emperor of de Zhou will be at odds. As you know, Taiden is in chaos right now. If de Zhou wants to take down Taiden in one go, we won't be able to stop them. If de Zhou becomes chaotic, they won't have time to harass us, right? Princess Tana paced slowly, the soft boots under her feet creaking on the snow. The more she thought about it, the more she felt that what she said that day made sense. Regardless of whether or not she could cause chaos in de Zhou, she could avenge the death of the Khan of Inari, so this trip would not be in vain. I know. Princess Tana sneered, when she falls into my hands, heh, a sneer replaced her unfinished words. Seeing this, Narisu's hands, which were clenched uneasily behind her back, relaxed. Then how does the princess plan to reply to the emperor? After all, she's a princess consort of Dezhou, and the inner palace is equivalent to the emperor's inner residence. I'm afraid it doesn't make sense to let a foreign official's wife in. Princess Tana waved her hand and said indifferently, it doesn't matter. The emperor dotes on me very much. If I say something, he'll agree. That depends on what you plan to say. Narisu facepalmed and thought for a while before carefully reminding, doesn't the Qin clan speak a little Taitan? She even learned Dezhou's etiquette in order to be the bride's envoy. Why don't you tell the emperor that you need someone to accompany you? The Qin clan has interacted with you before, so they're more familiar with you. Moreover, they speak the same language, so you can learn etiquette from her. Princess Tana was stunned for a moment, then nodded with a smile. This idea is very good. With a proper reason, the Emperor of Dezhou will agree to this princess's request. After the two reached an agreement, both of them looked very relaxed. The atmosphere of farewell also became warm and sad. After Princess Tana returned to the palace, she was thinking about what to say. What no one knew was that when Narisu's group left the capital and set up camp in the evening, a guest came to the camp. Mr. Chiu, I've been waiting for you here for a long time. Narisu smiled and invited the person into the tent, then politely brought a bowl of hot tea. This Mr. Chiu was over the age of 30, with a white face and a short beard. He was very handsome. At first glance, one could tell he was from the Chiu family. He was Chiu Yuanqing's man, called Chiu Feipu, and was Chiu Feishan's brother. This time, the Chiu family's change, Chiu Yuanqing was able to successfully assassinate Chiu Guang and become the head of the family. Chiu Feipu played a big role. How's the matter? Mr. Chiu only needs to tell the head of the Chiu family that fortunately, the matter has been completed. I also asked the head of the Chiu family to keep his promise. After our Taitan helps your Chiu family to get rid of Pang Jishi, the Chiu family will cooperate with us to get rid of Jiziu. This is natural. Chiu Feipu smiled. Narisu Darren was very decisive. Since you are so happy to help, our Chiu family naturally understands the Taitan's thoughts. After Jiziu and Pang Shao fall, first, we can take revenge this time. Second, Dezhou has no fierce general, and I'm afraid they won't have the strength to invade the north again. Taitan can be safe. Exactly. Narisu picked up the teacup and slowly took a sip. He thought about what to say, and after a moment, he said, the head of the Chiu family's plan is very good. You don't have to do it yourself. Dezhou's emperor will naturally help you get rid of Pang Jishi. Chiu Feipu smiled, that's right. Since ancient times, heroes have a weakness for the charms of beautiful women. Pang Jishi can be considered an ambitious and ruthless person. His biggest weakness is the Qin clan. Once something happens to the Qin clan in Dezhou's palace, or if the Dezhou's emperor kills the Qin clan, then Pang Jishi will definitely be furious for the sake of his woman. At that time, whether Li Qitian kills Pang Shao, or Pang Shao rebels and kills Li Qitian, Dezhou will be in chaos. Li Qitian and Pang Shao will both suffer losses. At that time, the Chiu family can support the Yu Qiyan to rise to power. Actually, Chiu Feipu didn't think highly of the Yu Qiyan. He felt that the Yu Qiyan was too incompetent and too stupid. However, the head of the Chiu family already thought highly of the Yu Qiyan and chose him. Whether it was Pang Shao or Jiziu, they both had their own opinions and didn't want to listen. It was better to choose someone easier to manipulate. Moreover, the Yu Qiyan was the orthodox Dayan. Since the Yu Qiyan was chosen, then anyone who could compete with the Yu Qiyan should be eliminated. Li Qitian, Pang Shao, and Jiziu should be eliminated. The reason why the Chiu family could cooperate with the Taiten was because they had the same goal. Chiu Feipu smiled and stroked his beard. Naraisu wasn't as certain as Chiu Feipu. Actually, I have some doubts about this plan. Why would a man go crazy for a woman? Peng Zhishi has a lot of troops and has been on the battlefield for so many years. The fact that he can stand tall in the imperial court is enough to prove that he's smart. Would a person like him really rebel for a woman? That's because you didn't see how Pang Shao attacked Jianchuan City with his troops. Chiu Feipu was in the Chiu family's troops at that time and was so scared that he almost peed his pants. Of course, Chiu Feipu couldn't say that out loud. He just smiled mysteriously. You'll know when the time comes. Don't worry, the Chiu family came up with this idea. When the time comes, we won't blame the Taiten for it. If we cooperate to kill Pang Shao, we'll kill Jiziyu. This is a deal, we won't go back on it. Chapter 780. Qin Yining spent another 2 days leisurely in the mansion. On this day, he was playing mahjong with second madam and chatting in the old madam's room when the young maidservant outside hurriedly ran to the corridor to pass on a message. Reporting to old madam, someone from the palace has come to pass on your majesty's verbal order for fourth grandaunt to go out and listen to the imperial edict. Old madam had been by Qin Huaiyuan's side for a long time, so she had suffered a lot of fright. Now, whenever she heard that your majesty had passed down an imperial edict, her heart would skip a beat and she would feel pain in her chest. Second madam knew about this problem of old madam's and hurriedly soothed her. Qin Yining watched from the side and felt somewhat uncomfortable. After all, the old madam was old. Regardless of whether she had done good deeds or bad deeds in the past, she was her father's biological mother and her grandmother. Old madam said, Sister Yi, quickly go and take a look at what's going on in the palace. Come back and tell me when you know. Yes, old madam, don't worry. Recently, it's very peaceful everywhere. There shouldn't be any major issues. Qin Yining smiled and comforted her. Her expression was gentle and serious. Seeing this, old madam's heart inexplicably relaxed a lot and she wasn't so anxious anymore. Good, good. You're a smart child. You can handle the matters outside well. I'm assured in this aspect. Although old madam didn't like Qin Yining, because Qin Yining was too smart and difficult to control, she had repeatedly embarrassed her. But in general, Qin Yining's contributions to the family were still great. Not to mention the distant past, Qin Huaining and Qin Baoning's marriage proposal had benefited a lot from the prince's mansion, not to mention other people. Old madam wasn't stupid. She was just a little lacking in her way of dealing with people because she was too assertive. Now that he had thought things through, and his body was indeed deteriorating day by day, he had restrained his desire to outdo others. His attitude had calmed down, and he was able to see things more clearly. Qin Yining was a little surprised by old madam's loving attitude, but he didn't feel too surprised. Matriarch, then granddaughter will go out to take a look. Qin Yining smiled as she stood up and bowed to matriarch and second madam. After he left, a dowager duchess watched as Qin Yining's figure disappeared into the distance. Then, she sighed softly. It's getting harder and harder to survive in this world. Yes. Second foreign actually had a lot of things suppressed in her heart, but she was meticulous. She could see that old madam's body wasn't feeling well, so she was able to suppress the desire to confide in her. She didn't want to say anything that would make old madam feel uncomfortable. Old madam wasn't like second old madam. She only shook her head, and her jadeite earrings hit her cheeks. Our family has been through a lot together. Those of us who were lucky enough to survive should work harder for our dead family members. I don't think our family situation is any easier than before. My brain seems to be temporarily separated from my body. I don't know when your majesty will be displeased and I will die. You're thinking too pessimistically. Although second old madam was also worried, even though she was in the boudoir, she could still feel the treacherous changes in the imperial court. She could also feel how difficult the situation of the family Qin and Prince Zhongshuan's estate was. Although they didn't have Qin Yining's sharp political sense, they could still feel the crisis. However, although second old madam thought this way, she couldn't let old madam feel more depressed for no reason. She comforted, "Don't worry, old madam. Your 3 sons aren't ordinary people. Think about it. Brothers in war, father and son are soldiers. Our family is tied together. Is there any obstacle that we can't overcome? Besides, eldest uncle is very smart. Sister Yi and Wang Yi are also very smart." As she spoke, second old madam gently massaged old madam's shoulders. Her fair hands moved on old madam's tea-gold brocade jacket, appearing very fair and delicate. Dowager Duchess relaxed her body comfortably and couldn't help but close her eyes. Second old madam smiled and said, "Also, even if something really happens, so what? Our family has gone through mountains of daggers and seas of fire together." These words made the two of them think of the tragic massacre in Dian. However, it didn't give people the feeling of pessimism. Instead, it made them feel full of pride. Yes, the men were all busy working hard. Hiding under the wings of the men, the womenfolk living a comfortable life couldn't do anything to help. The only thing they could do was to make the family more peaceful and comfortable, and not take the initiative to provoke trouble and complicate matters. This was the only thing the womenfolk could do for the family at present. Qin Yining's side came to the antechamber of the front yard. The one who came to pass on the message was an unfamiliar middle-ranking official. This servant pays respects to Prince Zhongshuan's Fei. Long live Wang Fei. The middle-ranking official respectfully bowed. This Gong is excused. Qin Yining's smile was like a flower. He leaned to the side to avoid the other's bow and returned half a bow. He said with a smile, "I'll have to trouble Gong to make the trip. Does your majesty have any orders?" The officials served the people in the palace and were often ordered around by their masters. Even for someone like him who had a slightly higher status, the big fish ate the small fish, and the small fish ate the shrimps. It was not easy to live a good life, and there were not many people who would sincerely respect them as eunuchs. But Qin Yining looked at him with a magnanimous gaze. There wasn't any disdain or contempt, only respect from the bottom of his heart. The middle-ranking official could be considered to have seen countless people in the palace. He could tell who was sincere and who wasn't. He had seen many beautiful women in the palace, but there weren't many who were as approachable as Qin Yining. "Oh, Wang Fei, don't be like this. This servant doesn't deserve it." The middle-ranking official once again bowed to Qin Yining. Qin Yining still leaned to the side to avoid it. But this time, he didn't make it difficult for the middle-ranking official to return the bow. The middle-ranking official smiled and said, "This time, I'm here to pass on your majesty's verbal order. Your majesty orders you to immediately enter the palace and accompany consort Shun." Qin Yining was surprised at first, but he soon understood. Princess Tana was spoiled and wanted to get her to her side so that she could take the opportunity to avenge Honoree. Qin Yining's expression didn't change in the slightest. Your Majesty gave the verbal order, which meant that he thought highly of her. If his expression was dark, could it be that he was dissatisfied with the imperial family? Many thanks, Gong. I'll immediately prepare. Did your Majesty say when you'll enter the palace? Wang Fei is too polite. Your Majesty only ordered this servant to come. Presumably, you'll be entering the palace today. Consort Shun asked your Majesty to choose you to enter the palace to accompany her. First, it's because you can speak the same language. Second, it's because she's familiar with you. Third, it's because you've learned the rules. Wang Fei, this is a great honor. The middle-ranking official said these words with the intention of flattering Qin Yining. Qin Yining accepted it with a smile, but he also saw through the details. It seemed that Princess Tana was really relying on the fact that she was favored and wanted to find an opportunity to deal with him. Li Qitian was also quite relaxed. He actually secretly allowed Princess Tana to cause trouble for him. Qin Yining made up his mind and ordered Ji Yun and Bing Tang, the two of you, pack up and follow me into the palace. He also ordered Xian Yun, Qiu Lu, and Lian Xiaozhou, you guys stay at home and look after the house. Tell my father what happened. Yes. The maidservants responded in unison. Qin Yining ordered the servants to prepare some food and wine to entertain the middle-ranking official first. He politely said, "Excuse me," and went to prepare the luggage. When he returned to the bedroom, the atmosphere was heavier than usual. Jing Zhe and the others had already received the news and were waiting in front of Qin Yining's door. When they saw Qin Yining return, they hurriedly came over and whispered, "Wang Fei, we'll follow you." Qin Yining couldn't help but laugh when he heard this. "How are you going to follow me? It's not like you don't know the situation in the palace. You can't bring a man with you. I've already made an exception by bringing Ji Yun and Bing Tang." The few of them couldn't help but feel dejected. What kind of place was the palace? That was Li Qitian's residence, Li Qitian's territory. Qin Yining only brought 2 maidservants into the palace to accompany Consort Shun. That was like sending a sheep into a tiger's den. If anything happened, Li Qitian could capture Qin Yining at any time and punish him. If something really happened, it would be too late for them to rescue him. Everyone was worried and anxious, like ants on a hot pan. Qin Yining found it funny. "You don't have to be like this. I'm entering the palace openly by imperial decree, so I'm safe on the surface. As for those who are secretly plotting against me, I just have to be careful. No matter how bad the situation is, can it be worse than when I was at the Taten?" Seeing Qin Yining laugh so easily, the few of them couldn't help but admire him. If it was an ordinary woman who was forced to be a hostage in the enemy's residence, she would probably have been scared to tears. But Qin Yining was able to face it calmly. After all, he had already experienced too many ups and downs. Everyone finally stopped talking. Qin Yining reminded them not to bring too many clothes and hair accessories. At the same time, he instructed Jing Zhe and the others, protect the residents well. Pay special attention to what happens around my father, including what happens in the imperial court. If there are any abnormalities, record it down and send a message to Wang Yi. Think of a way to send a message to me as well. As for how I'm going to send a message to Consort Shun's palace, I'll ask my father if he has any ideas. Of course, if the message isn't urgent, it doesn't matter to me. My only request is that all of you take care of yourselves. Don't rashly take risks just to send a message to me. Jing Zhe and the others nodded. Don't worry, Princess Consort. Jing Zhe walked to Qin Yining's side and said in a low voice, Zhong Yiba also said that there are people in the palace who can help Princess Consort. Can Zhong Yiba be trusted? Qin Yining froze, then shook his head. Although I have a close relationship with him, it's best not to involve outsiders in matters of the palace. If something really happens, it would be too big of a favor. If I want to send a message to you, I'll think of a way. Anyway, you don't have to worry. Just focus on taking care of the residents. Yes. Everyone bowed in unison. Qin Yining brought Ji Yun, Bing Tang, and 3 small bundles out the door. He instructed the servants to prepare a carriage. Qin Yining and the others finished preparing the carriage in the time it took to finish a meal. At this time, Zhongyu had just eaten his fill and was drinking tea. When he saw Qin Yining and the others come out, he immediately bowed. Thank you, Princess Consort, for the meal. Don't mention it. It's been hard on Gonggong to come all the way here. This simple meal isn't worth much. It's just to fill your stomach. I've already prepared everything. We can leave now. Chapter 781. Tricks. This time, the imperial edict to enter the palace came very suddenly. Qin Yining originally thought that after entering the palace, she would think of a way to contact her father or have someone by her side help pass on the message. However, she didn't expect that as soon as she left the room with the official, she would run into Qin Huaiyuan, who had just rushed back to the Fu. When he saw Qin Huaiyuan, the official's attitude was extremely respectful. Greetings to Lord Qin. This Gonggong may dispense with the formalities. Qin Huaiyuan smiled and reached out to support him. Zhongguan stood up. As he was covering his sleeves, his arm bumped into Qin Huaiyuan's sleeve. He immediately felt something heavy fall into his sleeve pocket. The official pinched it without batting an eyelid. It should be a silver ingot. Or rather, this was a high-ranking official who was rich and overbearing. The official was very happy. He almost couldn't hide his smile. He softly said, "Many thanks to Lord Qin." Qin Huaiyuan smiled and said, "There's no need to be so polite. My daughter will have to trouble you to take care of her in the palace." I don't dare. Serving the princess is this servant's duty." After the two sides exchanged some pleasantries, Qin Huaiyuan smiled and said, "Could you please delay for a moment? I still have some words to instruct my daughter." The official pinched the silver ingot in his sleeve and nodded with a smile before walking to the side. Qin Yining walked in front of Qin Huaiyuan and said in a low voice, "Father." Qin Huaiyuan stroked his beard and said with a smile, "Your Majesty has chosen you to serve consort Shan Nyang. This is your good fortune and also because he thinks highly of you. After entering the palace, you must strictly abide by the palace rules and serve with all your heart. Do you understand?" Qin Yining immediately nodded respectfully and responded, "Daughter will follow father's instructions." Qin Huaiyuan nodded and pretended to continue telling Qin Yining the rules. "In fact," he said in a low voice, "there is an official who serves tea in the imperial study. His name is Jiang Yuan. He is someone that Ji Shi and I have trained. If you encounter an emergency and really can't do it, you can find him." Qin Yining's pupils constricted, and his panic gradually spread. She had never known that Qin Huaiyuan had planted spies in the palace. Now, for her to enter the palace this time, Qin Huaiyuan even told her this secret. It was clear that Qin Huaiyuan was the same as her. He was not optimistic about her trip to the palace this time. "I understand," Qin Yining replied in a low voice. Then he smiled and said, "Don't worry, father. I know what I'm doing. But you have to promise me that no matter what happens, father has to remember that you're here to guard the safety of the two families. Don't only care about me at critical moments." A flickering candlelight illuminated the hall, making it dim and warm. The orange light shone from Princess Tana's chin, making her look slightly fierce. Qin Yining stood with his hands by his side, listening to Princess Tana cursing concubine Yun in Taitan. Qin Yining wasn't fluent in Taitan. He could only speak some simple words. It was better to listen than to speak, but if the other party spoke too fast, she couldn't keep up. However, this didn't prevent Qin Yining from being a pillar here. Princess Tana cursed while secretly observing Qin Yining's reaction. She was waiting for Qin Yining to show the slightest sign of impatience. Then she could use it to show Qin Yining her power. But who knew that after staying up until the middle of the night, Qin Yining was still the same. She was so sleepy that she couldn't open her eyes. "Concubine Prince Zhongshuan, what do you think?" Princess Tana asked in Taitan. Qin Yining actually understood, but he just pretended to be confused. When Princess Tana saw this, she knew that Qin Yining didn't understand what she was saying. She sneered and continued to curse in Tatan, "Slut, seducing Si Qin Khan and causing the death of a Nari Khan, yet you still have the nerve to stand in front of me." Qin Yining understood most of it and guessed what she meant, but he still pretended not to understand. After listening to Princess Tana's curses for a while, Princess Tana finally couldn't take it anymore and everyone dispersed. Returning to the side chamber, Qin Yining untied his long hair and lay down with his clothes on. Ji Yun and Bing Tang sat on the left and right of the bed. "Concubine, how are we going to live? She's too good at tormenting. I think she's 10,000 times worse than Concubine Yun. She has a noble status, so she's naturally different. Everything must be guarded against arrogance and rashness. Just be patient." Bing Tang wanted to give people itchy medicine again. But this was the imperial palace. Bing Tang had been forced to leave the bottles and jars outside the palace before entering the palace. "Concubine, you should rest well. We don't know what she's going to do tomorrow. And you should all quickly go to sleep. Don't take off your clothes first, so as not to wake us halfway." Qin Yining was right. She had just fallen asleep for less than 2 hours when a palace servant came to invite her to come to the palace. The palace servant was obviously very sleepy. He covered his mouth and yawned. When he saw Qin Yining, his eyes were full of tears. Qin Yining was too lazy to argue with him. Even if he argued, this was Li Qitian's inner residence and Princess Tana's territory. The more she did, the more mistakes she made. The more she said, the more mistakes she would make. She just had to abide by the rules until she could leave the palace. Therefore, Qin Yining didn't ask much and directly followed the palace servant to Princess Tana's bedroom. However, Qin Yining only stood in front of the door of the bedroom and spoke through the grill. "Concubine Shun, if you have any orders, please don't hesitate to say it. This official's wife, Prince Zhongshuan, Qin clan, is listening with respectful attention." Princess Tana's long hair was combed into 2 long braids. She stood in front of the door in her pajamas. As long as she took a step forward, she would be able to see the person outside through the crack of the door. She looked outside and gestured to the servant inside the room. Then, she walked a little farther and whispered, "Come in and talk." Qin Yining didn't move. "Concubine Shun, please think twice. It's late at night. Although you and I are both women, rumors are fiercer than tigers. If this official's wife enters your bedroom to talk to you at this time, it's very likely that someone will use this matter to attack you. Not to mention other things, if someone accuses you of having a close relationship with an extramarital affair, you may lose the emperor's heart. Please think twice." Princess Tana didn't think too much. She didn't want to directly take Qin Yining's life. She wasn't crazy. If she killed Qin Yining like this, wouldn't all the blame be on her? But she also couldn't let Qin Yining be so arrogant. If she couldn't kill her, then she'd rather let her live a life worse than death. There were so many punishments in the palace, and many of them were the kind that didn't leave scars. As long as she entered this door, she didn't believe that Qin Yining, a dignified princess, would spread the news outside if she was treated that way. At that time, wouldn't she have to suffer in silence? But Qin Yining refused to come in from the beginning. Princess Tana said in a deep voice, "You just entered the palace, and you're already not listening to this princess's orders." Qin Yining was also impatient with Princess Tana's pestering. She sneered and said, "It seems that Princess Tana's Dezhou dialect needs to be learned more. This official's wife is only here to teach you the rules. This official's wife is a woman with an order, not a maid who can be ordered around at will. You didn't settle down properly in the middle of the night, but asked this official's wife to enter your bedroom. This official's wife doesn't feel that she's so familiar with Princess Tana that we can talk for a long time. This official's wife advises you to be quiet. You're always jumping up and down. You should be careful. You. Duke Tana was so angry that he pulled open the palace door. Qin Yining saw Princess Tana angrily striding out. She pointed at Qin Yining and said, "You dare to be disrespectful to this princess." Chapter 782. You've got guts. How dare you speak to me like this? Princess Tana pointed at Qin Yining, unable to restrain her anger. Come, arrest her for me. Nyang nyang, this. Several palace maids looked at each other and finally knelt down. Nyang nyang, this servant doesn't dare. Don't dare. I ordered you, how dare you disobey my orders? Don't tell me you don't want to live anymore. Nyang nyang, please forgive us, but the princess consort is a woman with a title. This consort Shun Nyang nyang doesn't need to make things difficult for the palace maids. Qin Yining chuckled. First, I didn't violate the palace rules, and second, I didn't harm consort Shun Nyang nyang. It wasn't a sudden vicious incident, and only the imperial clan court can convict me. Now, I just said a few words. To put it bluntly, I received the imperial edict to teach you the rules of Dezhou, and you want to kill me. Not only is this difficult for me, but the palace maids are also very difficult. You. Nyang nyang, please have a good rest. Tomorrow morning, you have to greet the Empress Dowager and the Empress. Don't delay your business. I will leave first. After Qin Yining finished speaking, she didn't care about Princess Tana's expression. She turned and walked to the side hall. Princess Tana hurriedly chased after her, stomping her feet in anger. Tayden gradually cursed. Qin Yining acted as if she didn't hear anything and directly returned to the side hall. Only then did Princess Tana realize how degrading her actions were. Even if no one understood what she said, everyone could see that she was reprimanded by a woman, and this woman was invited by herself to accompany her and teach her the rules. The cold air of the first month gradually calmed Princess Tana down. She turned and returned to the bedchamber with a straight face. She waved her hand and dismissed the servants who were prepared in the hall just now. The future is long. Your Majesty is doting on me now, so I'm not in a hurry. Qin Yining returned to the side hall. Ji Yun and Bing Tang had been waiting for a long time. How is it, princess? What's the matter with that Tayden princess? You must go back to the Empress tomorrow. Qin Yining patted Bing Tang's hand comfortingly and said, the Empress can't even take care of herself. She doesn't have the means to protect me. Also, there is no evidence. If I say it, it will seem like I am sowing discord between the Empress and the Empress. How can there be no evidence? I saw it all. Bing Tang was so angry that her face turned red. Ji Yun shook her head and said with a frown, Princess Consort is right. We can testify, but we are Princess Consort's trusted aides. Our words are not enough to testify. The palace servants of Chushu Palace had to make a living under Consort Shun. Who would dare to stand up and testify against Consort Shun? It's not like I don't want to survive in the future. Then are we just going to let her torment Wang Fei like this? Bing Tang was a little anxious. How can Wang Fei's body endure this torment? She won't let people sleep in the middle of the night and has people stand by her side to listen to her speak. Dezhou can't even speak properly. How can she have so much to say? Qin Yining was amused by Bing Tang's cute appearance when she complained. The irritation caused by Princess Tana disappeared. All right, don't be angry. He pulled Bing Tang's hand and said with a smile, she hates me in her heart. That's why she's trying to torment me. Actually, this is a good thing for me. A good thing. That's right. At least she's not a scheming person. If she had hatred in her heart but a smile on her face, that would be even more difficult to guard against. Now that she's willing to directly express her disgust for me, she's not that scary anymore. Bing Tang thought about it carefully. This was really the case. She smiled and said, Princess Consort is always able to see through everything. Us servants followed you to help you. In the end, when something happened, it was you who comforted us. What are you saying? Qin Yining pulled Ji Yun with the other hand and let them sit on either side of her. She said sincerely, if it wasn't for me, why would you be dragged into the palace? You have to be careful in every aspect of your life in the palace. Even if you didn't make a mistake, you will still be found by things. I'm actually a bit worried. I'm being targeted because I'm Shi's wife. It's our identity that caused this situation. But you are innocent. What are you saying, Princess Consort? Ji Yun and Bing Tang shook their heads. Bing Tang said, we've experienced so many difficulties together. We've overcome so many difficulties. When have we ever been afraid? Why are you talking about tiredness again? If Princess Consort didn't appear back then, the Demon Empress people would have sneaked into Fairy Temple and assassinated me. Would I be able to live peacefully until today? I'm not the only one who thinks so. Ji Yun also thinks so. That's right. Ji Yun also said, Princess Consort is a kind person. Wang Yi also saved this servant's life. If Wang Yi hadn't taken me in back then, this servant would have starved to death. Also, this servant didn't say thank you when we were in the limelight with Princess Consort. Now that we're in trouble, this servant is resentful. What kind of person would this servant be? Bing Tang nodded repeatedly. Qin Yining sighed and patted their shoulders. I know what you're thinking. Don't worry. I will definitely protect you. We will all leave the palace safely. Yes, this servant knows. The three of them were master and servant. But now that their lives were in the hands of others, they relied on each other like sisters. Qin Yining sometimes felt that he was really lucky. Although he had been bumpy when he was young, he had his adoptive mother to raise him. When his adoptive mother was seriously ill, his beautiful brother helped him. He went up to the mountains to survive. He dug wild vegetables, herbs, and hunted for a living. The hunters and doctors he met were mostly good people. She was like a weed in the wilderness. But who would have thought that she would be met by her father's advisor? Based on her appearance and her father's similarity, she was found and brought back. Her life was full of ups and downs, but there were also hidden surprises everywhere. Perhaps this trip to the palace was very dangerous, but who could say that there was no hope? The three of them let their hair down and slept in their clothes for the night. Fortunately, Princess Tana was also tired. She slept deeply and didn't have the mind to torment others. Thus, the palace servants and Qin Yining all slept. Early the next morning, Princess Tana changed into a light green robe with narrow sleeves. She wore a hat with pearl tassels and feathers on her head. Her hair was neatly coiled up. Taton on her body looked very unique in this palace where palace clothes could be seen everywhere. In addition, she was tall and her appearance was full of exotic charm. It was really a strange scene. No wonder Li Qitian liked her. Qin Yining smiled when he saw it. Princess Tana looked at Qin Yining. What do you mean? What are you laughing at? Replying to Imperial Concubine Shun's words, Imperial Concubine's dress is elegant and beautiful. Princess Tana was happy when she heard this. She rolled her eyes at Qin Yining. At least you have a little taste. Qin Yining smiled and said, Imperial Concubine's beauty is obvious to all. Princess Tana smiled and said, follow this princess to Ci and palace. Yes. Qin Yining lowered his head and followed behind Princess Tana with Ji Yun and Bing Tang. Princess Tana was used to seeing the majestic and rough palaces of the Titan. She had been in Dezhou for a few days now, but every time she saw the exquisite and gorgeous palace of Dezhou, and the imperial gardens that were still beautiful even in winter, she couldn't help but slow down and admire them. She even felt that it was strange that her father and ancestors always wanted to invade the south. Who didn't want to have such a rich and beautiful place? If the Titan people could come to Dezhou to graze, wouldn't there be bigger, more lush pastures? Princess Tana's eyes were shining, and her heart was full of envy. This expression was seen by imperial concubine Yun, who was wearing a light blue palace dress and a white fox fur cloak. This princess was wondering who it was. Isn't this imperial concubine Shun's little sister? Imperial concubine Yun walked over slowly, her charming eyes sizing up Princess Tana, her heart full of disdain. She's just a barbarian. Look at how she's dressed, it's strange and ugly. Although she looks alright, her skin is too rough, and she looks much rougher. She doesn't look like a woman at all. Imperial concubine Yun once again judged Princess Tana in her heart, and at the same time, despised her. Imperial concubine Yun relied on her beauty and status. She didn't even care about the empress in the palace. Now that a barbarian princess has won your majesty's favor, she couldn't find any other way to vent her disdain except to despise this person every time they met. Imperial concubine Yun didn't like Princess Tana, and Princess Tana also didn't like Imperial concubine Yun. In particular, she couldn't understand Dezhou's words very well. This imperial concubine Yun spoke like a sparrow that had eaten too many melon seeds. She always spoke quickly, and her voice was always chattering, which annoyed her to no end. It was fine if she didn't understand what she said, but she was also so arrogant. Wasn't it just because she had the Empress Dowager as her aunt? She was so proud that it was as if she had received an imperial edict to bestow her the title of Empress. Princess Tana coldly snorted, ignoring Imperial concubine Yun. Imperial concubine Yun's gaze bypassed Princess Tana and stared at Qin Yining. Prince Zhongshuan's imperial concubine. Yes. This subject's wife pays respects to imperial concubine Yun. Qin Yining smiled and bowed. Imperial concubine Yun sneered, and her gaze wandered between Princess Tana and Qin Yining. Then she sneered, "You're really fierce. Whoever is favored, whoever is powerful, you're fawning over them. Previously, you were like a dog trying to curry favor with the Empress, but now, you can't stand the Empress's cowardly appearance, so you've turned to Imperial concubine Shun." Imperial concubine Yun sneered and leaned closer, saying in a low voice, "This concubine suggests that it's better for you to rely on this concubine. Who knows, if this concubine is in a good mood in the future, this concubine might even give you a way out. Those who follow me are either cowards or barbarians. Aren't you afraid that you'll be dragged to accompany them to the grave?" Qin Yining lowered his eyes. Many thanks for Imperial concubine Yun's concern. If Imperial concubine Yun is interested, you should learn more about the palace rules. Imperial concubine Yun gritted her teeth and didn't say a word. Ever since Qin Yining had framed her for wanting to injure the imperial prince, she had been forced to reflect on her actions for several days. She had also been forced to learn a lot of rules. It wasn't easy for her to regain the Empress's favor, but Qin Yining still dared to mock her to her face. "Don't be so smug. This concubine only wants to see how long you can be smug for. There's no need for you to worry about that." You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.